Her own father planned to use her as bait. Destinus believed the arranged marriage was about power, money, and family loyalty. Then she broke into her father's computer and found the messages that changed everything. The wedding was never meant to protect her. It was designed to lure the De Castro family into a trap, kill Ruben, seize their assets, and lock Stephanie away once she had served her purpose. Tonight, you and I are going to step straight into the suffocating shadows of a shattered family dynasty. Picture the scene, Anne. A sprawling, dimly lit cathedral. At the center stands Stephanie, drowning in heavy white silk she despises, mere seconds away from trading her freedom to the most dangerous enforcer her father employs. She truly believed she had severed these toxic strings when she vanished into the sun-drenched streets of Barcelona. But a single phone call dragged her right back into the underworld. The man waiting at the altar is no cruel twist of it leaves us with a brutal life lesson. You can never simply outrun a dark past when the poison is already pumping through your own veins. Stick with me. We are about to unravel this tragedy piece by piece. The bridal gown draped over her trembling shoulders looks like a masterpiece, yet it feels as heavy as solid iron. This is not just expensive silk meant to drown a fragile soul. Every single stitch and cold pearl pressed into the bodice feels like a chain binding her permanently to the syndicate. She stands completely alone in the equital suite of her father's Manhattan mansion, staring into a massive gilded mirror. The hollow-eyed girl looking back is a total stranger. Here is a quiet life lesson we must learn. Sometimes the most exquisite things in life are just beautifully disguised prisons. The truly haunting part of this nightmare is that the dress fits perfectly. They constructed her cage without ever needing to ask for her measurements. The heavy silence of the room shatters the moment a deep voice tells her she looks beautiful. Stephanie does not even turn her head. Adriano, her father, and the absolute king of this crime syndicate, steps into the suite and clicks the heavy door shut. He stands tall, a silver-haired phantom wrapped in a dark custom suit that cost a small fortune. He plays the legitimate businessman flawlessly. But Stephanie knows the bleeding truth. She has watched him, watch the shadows pool in the room, heavy and suffocating. The silence stretches between them, humming like a wire pulled just seconds from snapping. He stares down at his daughter. This is the man smooths the spikes of over shoulders, stands the cold architect of her absolute misery. You can see the tragedy of their bond in the slight tension of his jaw. He looks at her pale, trembling face, entirely refusing to acknowledge the psychological wounds he is tearing open. Instead of pulling her close, he simply adjusts the heavy gold links of his cuffs, meets her tear-filled eyes, and masks his pure control behind the cruel justification of a parent. Genuine love is supposed to be your ultimate safe haven, never a calculated transaction designed to break your spirit. Picture the suffocating agony of this waking nightmare. Stephanie clenches her hands into tight fists, her frame shaking with unfiltered rage. The camera lingers on her tear-stained cheeks as she looks her father directly in the eye. Her voice cracks as she declares he no longer controls her life, calling him nothing but a ruthless criminal. The tension in the bridal suite is thick enough to choke on. Adriano, the untouchable Don, does not even blink. He steps into her space, his voice dropping to a terrifying rumble. He claims this forced marriage to Ruben is purely to protect her from the violent underworld he built himself. It is a bitter truth to swallow. Sometimes the people claiming to shelter you from the storm are the exact ones who summoned the rain. Stephanie is hanging on, by a single thread. Notice the frantic rise and fall of her chest, ready to rip that suffocating veil off and shred the white silk into pieces. She fires back, her voice trembling, screaming that she does not need a caretaker. But screaming at a mob boss is useless. He absorbs her burning rage like a solid stone wall. Desperate, she throws her last weapon, claiming she already met Ruben organically in Barcelona. The Don simply tilts his head and letting out a slow, chilling smirk. He already knew. He was the one who sent Ruben across the world to shadow her every move. Watch the light die in her eyes as her reality shatters in real time. Just because you think you are calling the shots does not mean someone else is not secretly pulling your strings. The betrayal hanging in the dim light operates on a completely different level of cruelty. Adriano casually drops the final hammer. He admits he sent the man to be her secret bodyguard, but claims Ruben falling for her was unscripted. Stephanie goes pale, the blood draining from her face. Her voice shatters into a sob as she screams that her entire life has been nothing but manipulative lies. You can feel her heartbreak echoing in the room as she realizes her perfect romance was a calculated mafia setup. The Don just hits us with cold logic, stating that Ruben genuinely cares, making this wedding's twisted arrangement ink perfect for his empire. The deepest cuts come from your enemies. They come from the people who casually weaponize your deepest emotions for their own selfish gain. The Don delivers his final checkmate. He tells her since she already loves the man, she just needs to walk down the aisle and put the ring on. A cold settles in her chest like a sinking stone. She glares at him, vowing to never forgive this betrothal, gives a slow nod, states the ceremony begins in 20 minutes and walks out. Left alone in the suffocating bridal suite, Stephanie stares at the tragic stranger in the mirror. The camera lingers on her hollow eyes, so something inside her finally snaps. Running away failed her. She needs a dark new plan. Sometimes running from your problems only delays the inevitable destruction. You have to turn around and step directly to the fire. Let us rewind back 3 weeks to Barcelona, where this whole nightmare began. Let us paint the scene. 3 weeks ago, Stephanie is bathed in the golden light of Barcelona. She sits at a sunny cafe, the warm breeze blowing through her hair. After suffocating in the sterile world of Zurich, surrounded by stiff men in dark suits who reminded her of the Mafia, this vibrant city felt like a pure freedom. For one beautiful fleeting moment, she is just a normal girl breathing in life. But watch closely as the bright illusion cracks. Her phone vibrates on the iron table, lighting up with a demanding text from her father. The joy completely drains from her face. She violently shoves the phone back into her bag, refusing to look. It is a fatal mistake. Ignoring a glaring warning sign does not make the hidden danger disappear. It just gives the monster, brilliantly in the dark, more time to quietly creep up behind you. We have to pull the camera back to truly grasp the scale of her disappearance. Picture the freezing New York rain 6 months ago. She vanished into the dead of night with a single leather suitcase, a forged passport her mafia boss father never sanctioned, and enough banded cash to vanish off the grid. She severed every tie her mother, her little brother, the stone-faced security details breathing down her neck. The camera tracks her early days of sheer paranoia, flinching at every passing shadow, convinced every stranger was a syndicate hitman. But time softens the edges of terror, and she slowly began to exhale, believing she was free. Here is the tragic truth about human nature. The illusion of safety is the deadliest trap we ever build for ourselves. The exact moment you let your heavy armor slip is the moment your dark past comes hunting for blood. The scene opens in bright afternoon sunlight. She swallows the last drop of coffee, walking toward a quiet bookstore job. Earning an honest paycheck made her feel beautifully ordinary. Then, the audio drops out. A sudden, freezing crawl of dread traces the back of her neck. You and I know that sickening weight of being watched. The camera whips around with her as she stops dead, her wide eyes scanning the blurred sea of chattering tourists. Nothing. She forces her rigid shoulders to drop, blaming the lingering paranoia of a cartel childhood. But do not ever ignore the cold warnings of your own blow. Always trust your primal Shrek instincts. Your body feels the sure shush of the wolf long before your eyes focus on its teeth. Desperate to drown out the creeping dread, she disappears into the loud, flashing chaos of the local nightclub. The lighting shifts to harsh, strobing neon. Stefani slumps against the sticky, alcohol-stained bar of a loud underground club. The heavy bass vibrates through the floorboards, a million miles away from the gilded cages of her Mafia youth. That is exactly the point. Sometimes, the only way to outrun the silent ghosts of your history is to plunge headfirst into the deafening chaos of the present. While her friend loses herself in the crowd, the Stefani's gaze drifts. The camera pulls focus across the smoky room, landing heavily on a figure standing by the speaker stacks. He is draped in absolute stillness. A sharp-arched jawline, a dark, is completely alien to this cheap tourist tribes. Cuts through the strobing lights, track registration. He misses nothing, and the dark reality sets in. Let us look at this by piece, shall we? The heavy bass of the club thumps in the background, but Stephanie only hears the frantic beating of her own heart. Across the suffocating room, their eyes lock. She desperately tries to convince herself he is just a stranger, a trick of the neon lights. But a second glance confirms the chilling truth. He is still staring, and then he offers a slow, calculated smile while it strips away her disguise. The lesson here is simple and unforgiving. When the shadow smiles back at you, it is time to run. She shoves through the sweaty crowd, her father's golden rule echoing in her mind. Trust absolutely no one. The freezing night air hits her lungs as she sprints toward the metro, only to freeze when a deep voice cuts through the dark. She turns, and there he stands, completely at ease. Picture the scene playing out like a dark, tragic film. The midnight street is damp, reflecting the pale glow of a street lamp. He's destiny to his voice thick with a smooth drawl. He promises he means no harm, but in her world, promises are just beautifully painted bait. Standing her ground, she demands to know why he is hunting her. He waves it off as coincidence. But she sees right through the game. Then he offers a quasi-white smile and admits his guilt. Sometimes, owning a mistake completely disarms a person. He steps closer, blurring the dangerous line of her personal space. She should have melted into the alleyways. The pull is already too strong. Our worst mistakes almost always begin in the exact moment we confuse as predators with a genuine human connection. This was the very fraction of a second where she should have bolted. Instead, she stands firm, warning him that she will scream and wake every sleeping soul if he tries a single thing. He simply nods, his expression entirely unbothered. They wander slowly past shut storefronts or barfronts and bleeding graffiti, the decaying city mirroring the panic rising in her chest. He asks for her name, and she offers up a ghost, whispering Anna into the night. He sees right through the fragile lie, but allows the fiction to breathe, introducing himself as Reuben. Soon, they arrive at her crumbling apartment building. The lesson here is simple and hard. Strays from the shadows follow you to your front door. Because you only should hungry wolf exactly where you sleep. Reuben studies the decaying architecture and smoothly compliments the ruin. She calls it a dump, earning nothing but a slow, heavy shrug. Stephanie watches this phantom, wondering why her sharp survival instincts have suddenly gone quiet. She asks again why he tracked her. The charming mask drops. He admits she looked like she was running, and he knows exactly how that cold fear feels. Their shared trauma hangs in the air, leaving her speechless. He murmurs goodnight to his fake Anna and dissolves into the street. 2 days later, the quiet illusion shatters. He is casually sitting in her local cafe. Life has a funny way of teaching us that coincidences simply do not exist. The ghosts we think we lose in the dark are often waiting for us in the broad daylight. Stephanie freezes in the cafe doorway, her blood turning to ice. Across the room, he waves her Maya over like an old friend. Against every warning siren in her mind, she takes the seat. "You are following me," she states, her voice trembling. He shakes his head calmly, claiming Wednesday is his regular day. "But it is Thursday," she fires back. Without missing a beat, he smiles and says he is just early. Then, he casually mentions her job at the bookstore, and her stomach caves in. He hears no stalker of offering a coffee and the freedom to walk away. The golden rule of survivals is clear. When someone has a perfectly smooth answer for every single question, they are playing a dangerous game of chess, and you are merely the pawn. You and I have probably both made a mistake exactly like this one, blinded by the quiet ache of loneliness. She absolutely should have walked out that door. Instead, she orders the coffee, and the steel trap silently snaps shut. For an entire week, Reuben weaves himself into the rhythm of her days. They share hidden diners and slow walks under the dying sun. He never pushes her boundaries or asks questions that dig up the past. She spent her youth dodging violent men, leaving her entirely defenseless against a man who simply sits beside her in peace. Finally, under the pale moon on an empty beach, where she breaks, she begs us to know why he is really there. This reveals a hard truth about human nature. When someone seems flawlessly patient, they are usually burying a secret deep enough to drag you under. Reuben smoothly dodges her question, offering a tired excuse about being caught between chapters in his life. But Stephanie refuses to let him hide, asking point blank if he is in trouble. He meets her gaze, softly asking her to define trouble. Sighing heavily, he confesses that his past choice angered some truly dangerous people. She demands to know if he is dangerous. Reuben looks at her with burning intensity, whispering that he is absolutely no danger to her. It is terrifying how desperately she needs to believe him. "I am not who you think I am," she confesses to the inquiring waves. I know," he replies, instantly, effortlessly stripping away her disguise. Never put your faith in someone who dances around your questions. That dance always leads straight to the blind edge. Her heart stalls completely in her chest. He strips away the illusion, telling her he knows Anna is a fiction and she is far more than a girl selling books. Then he offers to use the most dangerous comfort. He tells her he simply does not care. Her dark past belongs only to her. The massive walls around Stephanie crumble into dust. With tears burning her eyes, she asks why he treats her with such grace. "Because you deserve it," he says, his voice heavy with honesty. She leans in, kissing him like a drowning sailor finding the surface. Held gently in his arms, she feels a strange warmth. She finally feels safe, but the exact second you finally feel entirely safe is usually the quiet breath right before the storm destroys your world. They slowly break apart, the freezing ocean breeze rushing between them like a warning. Reuben rests his forehead gently against hers, whispering they will sort the truth out later. She nods, and for one fragile moment, the universe feels perfectly aligned. But in tragic stories like these, peace is always a carefully crafted lie. 3 days later, her world splinters. She is locking up the bookstore when her phone begins to vibrate. An unknown number flashes on the screen. The voice that answers freezes the blood in her veins. Marco Santini, her father's most ruthless enforcer. There is no warmth or hesitation in his tone. Your father wants you home, he commands. You can run until your shoes wear thin, but the toxic poison of your bloodline will always track your footprints. Stephanie grips the wooden counter, fighting to keep the terror out of her voice. She refuses to return to that violent cycle. Marco lets the heavy silence stretch out before dropping the blade. We have your brother, he states. Her knees instantly give out. She collapses to the floor, crying out that he is a liar, demanding proof. A second later, the frail, trembling voice of little Luca echoes through the speaker. He begs his sister to listen to their father right before the line clicks dead. Stephanie stands alone in the dim bookstore, shaking uncontrollably. She knows the absolute depths of her father's cruelty. She grabs her bag and bolts. This is how true evil operates. Monsters never bother knocking. They simply reach into your life and violently steal the one thing you cannot live without. Let us look at that terrible moment together, because this is where the trap firmly closes. Ruben finds her sobbing into her hands on the freezing sand. She forces the horrible truth out. She must go back, or her father will destroy her little brother. Ruben sits beside her, listening to the crashing waves, before speaking the words that change everything. What if I can help? Stephanie stares at him, lost. Calmly, Ruben reveals he knows her father. He knows the brutal men in her family's syndicate, and swears on his life he can keep her safe.
She has no idea who this man truly is, yet he claims to understand her darkest nightmares. This is the tragic illusion of rescue, when the comforting stranger in the dark suddenly reveals his teeth.
You are already locked inside the cage with him. Ruben reaches through the cold night air, wrapping his hands tightly around hers. He begs for her trust, staring at her with frightening certainty. She looks into his dark eyes, searching for a lifeline, and whispers her surrender. Okay. In a single breath, she makes the most catastrophic choice of her young life. 2 days disappear in a blur. She lands in the grey chill of New York, where Marco and his soldiers wait on the tarmac. They throw her into a black vehicle, tearing toward the family estate. Her father, Adriano, is waiting in his velvet-lined study. Welcome home, Bambina, he murmurs, the room thick with unspoken violence. It is a harsh law of nature. If you willingly walk back into the lion den, you cannot be surprised when the beast finally bares its fangs. And Stephanie stands frozen, fists clenched white against the dim shadows, demanding to see Luca. Adriano ignores her panic. He slowly pours a vintage scotch, the amber liquid catching a stream of dusty light. The boy is safely at school, he notes. When her voice breaks over the threat, Adriano offers a hollow smirk. They never promised harm, he murmurs, only possession. It is a psychological cage meant to shatter her will. Luca will survive, provided she plays her part. Her ultimate price? In 3 weeks, she will marry Ruben, merging 2 underworld empires in blood. The floor turns to ash beneath her feet. You and I must remember this tragic lesson. Never sit to play a hand against the deck. Long before you even pull up your chair, the deck is perfectly stacked against you. Adriano's laughter strikes the marble walls, a sharp, unforgiving sound. He asks his daughter if she truly believed meeting a European syndicate heir in Barcelona was destiny. Pure illusion, he mocks. He sent Ruben to track her down, but the sweeping romance? That emotional cage was Ruben's own masterpiece. Stephanie's entire world shatters. She bolts for the doors, but Marco's enforcers swallow her up before she hits the gravel. 24 hours later, she sits in Rosa's urn at the dining table. You're draped in heavy silk. She stares at the man who broke her spirit, yet who still wears the beautiful mask of her savior. You and I must remember this painful truth. Sometimes the charm prince sweeping you off your feet is actually the villain dragging you straight back in the dark. The silence in the room feels like a physical weight. Ruben sits across from her, projecting that same golden warmth that once made her feel safe. Stephanie refuses his gaze, staring at her porcelain plate, swallowing the desperate urge to scream. Adriano tries to play the proud patriarch, loudly pushing for wedding daters, but Ruben effortlessly cuts him off. He demands to speak to Stephanie, alone, his voice carrying a dark and chilling authority that makes even a hardened boss like Adriano back away. The heavy oak doors click shut, leaving a space thick with ghosts. Ruben looks at her, his posture tense, and breathes out 4 quiet words. I did not know it is a harsh lesson for us to carry. True power never needs to shout. It speaks loudest when it barely whispers. Stephanie's head snaps up, eyes burning with the agony of betrayed trust. Ruben leans across the table, his perfect composure cracking. He swears, his voice rough with desperation, that he had no idea she was the boss's daughter. He claims he was merely hired to tail a runaway. She does not buy a single poisoned syllable. If that is true, she spits back. Then why are you still forcing Smearin now, huh? Ruben's jaw clenches. He looks away, muttering that it is complicated. That is the breaking point. Stephanie shoves her chair back, the heavy wood screaming against the floor. Res pune, she yells that he used her very soul for a cheap business deal. Always remember this simple lesson. When the people who hurt you claim their motives are complicated, they are just preparing you for absolute chaos. Look at the wreckage of this betrayal. Ruben stands before her, using those wounded eyes as a shield. He has the nerve to whisper that he cares for her far more than he intended. Hot tears spill over Stephanie's cheeks, fueled by pure self-hatred. She despises her own heart for believing in their sunlit days in Barcelona, confusing a beautiful cage with a true sanctuary. Pointing a trembling finger at the door, her voice cracks as she demands he leave. Ruben offers a hollow promise to make things right before slipping away. Left alone in the quiet room, her hands shake uncontrollably as the dark reality finally sets in. Her own bloodline is the ultimate prison. Remember this painful truth. Never put your faith in some promises to rescue you from the very trap they helped construct. The Rizzi decade is 21 days away, and the walls are closing in. Stephanie spends the night staring at the ceiling. They have stripped her childhood bedroom, painting over her past with a suffocating, sterile cream. By 6 in the morning, raw panic drowns her. She laces up her running shoes, desperate to slip past her father's guards. You and I can feel her heart pounding as she makes it 3 blocks. Then a sedan cuts off her path, gliding in like a silent predator. The tinted window rolls down to reveal Marco in the pale dawn light. He quietly orders her inside. She wraps her arms around herself, defensively claiming she is just out for a run. But the bitter truth always catches up. You cannot outrun your darkest demons, especially when those demons drive armored cars. Marco ignores her hollow excuse. Stephanie loses her grip, screaming that they cannot keep her locked away like a prized prisoner. She wants to hit him, to shatter that bulletproof glass, just to feel the sharp sting of control again. But then her eyes catch the shape of a weapon hidden beneath Marco's tailored coat. The fight drains out of her trembling limbs. She knows this brutal cycle ends. Defeated, she sinks into the leather seat. The drive back to the mansion is swallowed by a suffocating silence. As they pull up to the towering iron gates, Marco softens his voice, claiming her father truly loves her in his own dark way. Always be careful with that justification. The most dangerous wounds in life are often delivered by those who claim they are only trying to protect you. Stephanie's glare is sharp enough to draw blood. She asks Marco, her voice dripping with venom, if her father wrote that script for him. Marco allows a ghost of a smirk, quietly admitting the sentiment was his own. It brings her no comfort. Pretty words do not bend iron bars. She forces herself up the mansion steps, her legs feeling like solid lead. Inside, her mother Elena sits at a grand table spread with fresh fruit and steaming dark coffee, looking like a flawless, untouchable underworld queen. Elena commands her to sit and eat, ignoring the shattered soul in front of her. Stephanie takes the seat, but keeps her shaking hands firmly in her lap. It is a quiet rebellion, but a vital one. They can drag you to the table and demand compliance, but they can never force you to swallow their lies. Elena pours the morning coffee with the ice-cold grace of a woman who has survived decades in the underworld. Born into this brutal life, she wears her dark crown with absolute perfection. Stephanie has run so far running, terrified of becoming the woman sitting across from her. When Elena casually brings up the romantic disaster in Spain, Stephanie breaks. She screams that her father sent armed men to drag her back in chains. Elena's expression does not even flicker. She sips her dark roast, coldly stating that Stephanie should have recognized the marriage as a real strategic move. Watch out for the subtle poison. Growing up in the dark might teach you how to survive, but you must never let that darkness become your definition of normal. Sticks with me here, because this is where the family trauma cuts deep. Stephanie demands to know if this wedding is for her happiness or just another cold chess move. Elena smoothly praises Ruben, calling him the perfect asset aesthetically with me. Stephanie is trembling now, screaming that Ruben manipulated her from the beginning. Her mother just waves a manicured hand, completely dismissing her daughter's agony. She coldly explains she was just a teenager when handed over to the boss, and that respect matters infinitely more than childish romance. When Stephanie desperately begs for a real choice, Elena delivers a chilling blow. She tells her she already wasted her one chance to run. It is a haunting truth. Sometimes, the choices we refuse to make are the exact ones that seals our fate forever. Elena's voice remains silky smooth, but you can feel the razor's edge buried inside. She calmly reminds her daughter that running away to Europe was a spectacular failure. Stephanie jumps up, her chair scraping harshly against the stone floor. She swears she would rather die than marry Ruben. Elena meets her tearful eyes with pure ice. She tells Stephanie she is far too soft, foolish to expect the universe to hand her a fair deal. Yes, promises. Stephanie bolts from the room, unable to hold back her violent sobs. By late afternoon, planners invade the mansion, transforming the dark ballroom into a pristine sea of white silk. It is a cruel, tragic illusion. The most beautiful celebration hubs often is built simply to bury the most miserable, broken hearts. The estate is suffocating under a mountain of imported white roses. Stephanie is paraded through her own home like an elegant hostage. She is told to stand still, fake a smile, and choose between two identical shades of ivory ribbon. She is completely dead behind the eyes, sleepwalking through a waking nightmare. Then comes Diane, a frantic planner with a headset and zero emotional awareness, begging for her thoughts on the centerpieces. Stephanie numbly tells her to pick one.
When Diane cheerfully reminds her that this is her special day, Stephanie almost laughs. She points across the room at her father, who is shaking hands on a massive new underworld deal.
She is nothing but current to them. Never let anyone convince you that your true worth is measured by how useful you are to their selfish agenda. The wedding planner freezes, terrified of the very flowers she arranges. Later that evening, Stephanie turns the heavy brass lock on her door. The click echoes, but the silence offers zero comfort. When a child is raised by killers, she learns to scan every shadow for a flaw. She paces the floor, moving the mental chess pieces. Her father, Reuben, the armed guards outside. Then, the realization hits her like a physical blow. Luca. Her chest caves in. Her little brother is the chain binding her to this brutal underworld. If she runs, her father will warp that innocent boy into a monster just to punish her. It is a tragic, unavoidable truth. Our deepest love will always remain our absolute most devastating vulnerability. Imagine the crushing weight pressing down on Stefani's lungs. What if she could pull Luke out before their father's hammer falls? Her hands shake as she fires off a frantic text, begging for a meeting. He replies instantly, chained to the estate by the Don's shadows. It is all hers. The next afternoon, a bruised Manhattan sky hangs low over the boys' prep school. Marco, her silent driver, stares blankly ahead, and then there is Luca, a boy far too soft for the blood soaking his family tree. His face breaks into a pure, desperate smile when he spots his sister, and she anchors him in a tight embrace. You and I know this feeling. Sometimes the only real light left in a corrupt world is the fragile warmth of the people we refuse to leave behind. Luca stares at her, wide-eyed and stunned. He whispers that he honestly believed she was gone forever. Stephanie gently pulls back, letting her eyes trace the details of her little brother. He still has that same messy hair and crooked smile, but now it is buried under a heavy, exhausted shadow. His hollow response to her questions shatters her completely. Marco hovers nearby like a grim specter, prompting Luca to beg for a walk. They drift into a freezing city park, the winter wind biting at their coats. Stephanie agonizes over how to expose their father's sick game, but suddenly stops thumbs in the frost. His voice cracks. He apologizes for being the bait that dragged her back into hell. Facing your deepest regrets is agonizing, but it is the true first step toward growing up. The boy is drowning in a sea of guilt. He kicks the dirt and, confessing that their father swore she was in mortal danger over in Barcelona. The realization that he was just a pawn in the Don's sick lie is tearing him apart. Stephanie holds his gaze, her voice dropping to a mournful, heavy whisper. The danger was entirely real, she explains, just not the kind that involves guns in the dark. As Luca stares in pure confusion, she shatters the illusion. That perfect man from Spain, Reuben, was a ghost on their payroll, sent to watch her every move. When real love bloomed, their father weaponized her heart for a ruthless Mafia merger. It is a terrifying reality. We must always look closely behind the curtain, because the most brutal traps are often wrapped in a sweet romance. A suffocating silence falls over the freezing park before Luca asks the one question that draws blood. Does she actually love Reuben? The word strikes Stephanie in the chest. She rubs her tired eyes, the heavy ache of betrayal settling deep in her ribs. She thought she did, but how do you love a ghost who ran from a script since day one? Reuben claimed innocence, but the trust is dead. Desperate, Luca grabs her freezing hands, begging her to run from the altar. She freezes. If she flees, the Don will crush her brother to force her return. She is trading her own life for his safety. Luca pulls away, disgusted by her martyrdom. Let this simple truth sink in. Love requires sacrifice, but you should never surrender your entire soul just to keep someone else breathing in the dark. Stefani warns him to watch his tones, but the bright fire in Luca's eyes refuses to fade. He demands she stop playing the tragic martyr, reminding her that she broke out of this cage when she was exactly his age. The boy is ready to walk through hellfire if it buys back her freedom. Tears blur Stefani's vision. Her sweet baby brother is hardening into a cold soldier right in front of her. He squeezes her cold fingers, offering the match to burn the wedding down. She aches for that escape, yet she knows the cruel reality of their father's wrath. Tichai promises to go to Thinklet. They sit together in the biting chill until Marco steps from the grey shadows. Time is up. Always remember this. The fierce loyalty of family can be the absolute greatest shield you ever hold. Stefani slowly rises in the frost, and Luca stands tall beside her, swearing to fight until the bitter end. She pulls him into a desperate embrace before the cold reality snaps back into focus. Moments later, she is trapped inside Marco's black sedan, rolling toward the estate in suffocating silence. Desperate, she leans forward, asking the driver if he would help her disappear. Marco remains a brick wall. He refuses, claiming the Don pays him well to keep her safe. Stefani's voice drips with pure venom. Safe for who? Me or my father? Marco just stares at the road ahead.
She walks in that massive mansion, but a beautifully decorated tomb. Here is a harsh truth. Walls built to protect you are often the exact same ones keeping you imprisoned.
The night deepens, and Reuben arrives without a single invitation. He glides past the armed guards like a phantom who already owns the throne, hunting Stefani down in the dark, cavernous library. She is hiding behind a thick novel, trying to numb the sharp pain of reality. His heavy footsteps echo, and her stomach drops to the floor. She glares up, demanding to know why he is there. Reuben slowly pushes the heavy oak doors shut, declaring they need to speak. She orders him out, but he casually perches on the arm of her leather chair. He knows she sees him as a poisonous snake, but he begs for 5 miserable minutes to explain his betrayal. Exhausted, she caves.
5 minutes. You and I both know how this goes.
Give a trespasser an inch, and they will always take the mile. The library air grows incredibly thick as Reuben leans closer. He confesses that when the Don first pitched this cursed marriage, Haish flat out refused. He did not need a hollow wedding to secure his dark crown, but then slid a photograph across the mahogany desk, explaining how she desperately wanted to escape their violent world. Reuben believed he could assist in and actually grant her freedom. His voice genuinely breaks as he swears the romance under the Barcelona sun was never an act. He meant to be a distant shadow, but then their eyes finally met. He drags a shaking hand through his hair, admitting she unraveled his cold plans. Let us be honest with ourselves. You can plot every move perfectly, but the raw gravity of human connection will always shatter your strategy. Stefani demands to know what he actually expected to find. A bitter smirk pulls at the corner of Reuben's mouth. He expected a hollow Mafia princess, exactly like the syndicate wives he grew up around. Instead, he found a quiet soul reading in a sunlit cafe, fighting desperately to be normal. Stefani snaps that she is normal, but Reuben whispers she is extraordinary. She instantly throws up her walls, ordering him to stop spinning sweet lies. Then comes the devastating, undeniable truth. Reuben confesses he deeply cares for her, but he still has to chain her to this altar. If he breaks the deal, his brutal family will strip his empire away. He is trading her freedom for a crown. Remember this rule. Judge a person by the cold chains they carry, not the sweet poetry they speak. Reuben paces the dim room like a cornered tiger. This is not about simple greed. It is raw, blood-eye survival. He was bred to rule this syndicate since he was 10 years old. If he walks away now, a ruthless cousin will usurp his throne and kill him. Stefani's voice drips with absolute ice as she notes he simply cannot let that happen. He stops dead in his tracks. The agony in his dark eyes is real as he insists that securing his empire does not mean he doesn't desperately want her. The Stefani steps right into his space, laying down the harsh law. She tells him his love is completely worthless if he is willing to hold her hostage to keep a crown. The lesson here is carved in stone. If a person's grand ambition requires you to live in a cage, you must walk away forever. Reuben's voice finally cracks, swearing it is not about the throne. Stefani demands the hard truth, challenging him to prove that she should ever trust him again. For the first time, this untouchable Mafia boss looks completely hollowed out. He whispers that he does not know how. Heartbroken, Stefani turns toward the door. His hand shoots out, catching her wrist in a desperate, bruising grip. He finally admits his true cowardice. He was terrified to reveal his identity in Barcelona because he knew she would run, and he could not bear to lose her. She hits him with a gaze of pure ice, stating he never actually had her. Reuben only pulls her slightly closer into the shadows. Here is a solid reality check. Building love on a massive secret is a guaranteed devastating collapse. The ambient sound fades as Reuben locks his dark eyes onto hers. He desperately promises that Barcelona was real, untouched by the poison her father infected her with. Stefani chokes on the air, her chest heaving as the syndicate's trap closes in. She accuses him of plotting another betrayal, screaming for proof of his loyalty. Reuben studies the tragic ruin of her face. He slowly releases her trembling wrist, stepping back to admit he has no proof left to give tonight. He begs for a single chance after their arranged vows, warning that isolation means a lifetime rotting in hatred. Her tears finally break. Trust is a devastatingly fragile glass. Once plant shattered, pretty promises turn to cheap ash. Rebuilding it requires the agonizing daily labor of honest action. In this fractured beat, Stefani completely despises him. He forces burning blood back into her veins right when she longs for the icy safety of being numb. Her voice splinters as she orders him out. Reuben absorbs the blow, offers a defeated nod, and melts into the shadows. The camera lingers on her shaking hands. The next sequence is a suffocating montage. Yards of white lace, cold dress fittings, and dead smiles. She plays the flawless Mafia princess, but beneath the silk, her sanity is fraying to dust. This sheer panic drives her to slip into her father's dark study. Taking your own heart just to keep a toxic peace is the fate which murdered your soul. Wear a heavy mask to please the crowd for too long, and it will eventually suffocate the real person underneath. The oak door clicks shut, sealing her inside the forbidden sanctuary of a ruthless crime lord. The room drowns in dark, menacing shadows. Stefani works frantically, tearing through mahogany drawers and scanning underworld ledgers. Then the music drops. Her trembling fingers pull out a thick folder labeled as the De Castro Alliance. The camera pushes in on her terrified face as she opens it. Brutal contracts spill out, gun running, dirty money, and the exact terms of her arranged marriage, already signed by both families. She flips another page and her lungs freeze. A buried clause states that if the wedding is cancelled, the partnership dies. Always hunt for the fine print. The ugly secrets people try the hardest to bury in the dark and hold the exact power needed to completely ruin your life. The camera tilts down to the true nightmare. A secondary clause dictates lethal retribution against immediate bloodlines if either crime family backs out. Stefani grips the desk as violent nausea hits her. Her father literally bet their survival on her walking down that church aisle. Suddenly, the sharp thud of heavy boots echoes in the hall. Panic floods her eyes. She violently shoves the docs back, slamming the drawer shut just as Marco's imposing shadow bleeds around the corner. His dead eyes analyze her shivering frame, asking if she is all right. She swallows hard, whispering a desperate lie about insomnia. He tells her to get some rest. The heaviest chains we are forced to drag through life are almost always locked onto our shoulders by selfish people who never asked for our consent. The scene cuts to the blinding white of a bridal boutique. Stefani stands motionless on a pedestal, staring into massive mirrors like a condemned prisoner. Seamstresses pin the heavy silk around her like a luxurious straitjacket. Her mother, Elena, lounges on crushed velvet, casually sipping champagne, completely blind to her daughter's hollow stare. Elena smiles coldly, calling the gown regal. Stefani gives her nothing but suffocates easily, swirling her drink. Elena casually confesses she sobbed her entire wedding morning until her makeup was ruined. When Stefani asks why, the warmth vanishes from Elena's voice. She was paralyzed with terror. Dressing up a dark family tradition in expensive lace does not change the truth. It is just pure, toxic trauma being violently handed down to the next generation. Elena casually claims her life turned out fine. The amateur touched it on Stefani as her hollow facade vanishes, replaced by blazing fire. Did it really? Elena's polished smile shatters. The dam breaks, and Stefani unleashes decades of suffocated rage. She shouts that her mother married a monster who gobbles his own children like cheap casino chips. The quake bar gentles into a horrifying silence. Elena marches her daughter into a shadowed corridor, pinning her against the wall. She hisses, asking if Stefani thinks she is actually blind to the blood on her husband's hands. Stefani leans in, calling her mother a willing accomplice to the syndicate. A sharp slap violently snaps Stefani's head back, ripping the comfortable blindfold of deep denial off. Someone guarantees they will immediately lash out with their absolute worst wrath. The crack of the slap echoes like a gunshot. A red mark blooms Stefani's cheek, but her gaze remains unflinching. Elena crowds into her space, hissing a venomous warning to never pass judgment. The matriarch unravels, spitting out that Stefani has no concept of the sickening sacrifices she's made to keep this cartel breathing. She weaponizes her trauma, declaring she played the silent pawn to ensure their survival. Elena's eyes freeze over. She brutally reminds Stefani she is not a special martyr, just the next sacrificial lamb in a cursed lineage of bought brides. She coldly dares her daughter to cancel the wedding and doom the alliance. Toxic families absolutely despise watching you escape. They will gladly forge chains out of suffocating guilt, drag you right back into their comfortable, dark traditions. The camera pushes in on Stefani, trembling in the dim hallway. Elena's cold whisper lingers in the air, a mother twisting the knife into her daughter. She claims she raised her to be better, dismissing Stefani's tearful hatred as a passing storm before walking away. But grief is a powerful catalyst. Later that night, enveloped in the oppressive silence of the estate, Stefani slips into her father's forbidden study. She cannot openly declare war without condemning her brother Luca to death, but she can fight from the shadows. The glow of the encrypted monitor casts harsh shadows across her pale face. She types his birthday, but the screen flashes denied. Let this be a reminder to you when the main door is bolted tight. You do not simply give up. You step back into the dark, watch closely, and find the hidden window. The harsh red light of the monitor reflects in her desperate eyes. She tries her mother's birthday. Another failure. Then her fingers tremble as she punches in Luca's date of birth. A soft click, and the screen bathes the dark room in a sickly green glow. She takes a shallow breath and plunges into her father's digital graveyard. Decades of bloody transactions unfold before her. Deep within a restricted folder, a single document catches her eye: wedding day contingency. She opens it, and the color drains from her degenerate cheeks. It is a detailed execution roster. Right at the top is a direct order to assassinate Ruben de Castro if the alliance ever wavers. Her father was using her marriage as a slaughterhouse trap. It is a terrifying truth we all must face. The very people smiling the brightest at your table might be the ones meticulously digging your grave. You and I need to look closely at this scene because the depth of her father's paranoia is staggering. As Stephanie scrolls through the glowing text, realizing this Don has engineered a bloody conclusion for every possible outcome. If Ruben renegotiates or if he walks away, death is the only answer. Yet her father missed one fatal blind spot. He never calculated that his own daughter might turn against him. She falls back into the heavy leather chair, her worldview shattering. For weeks, she viewed Ruben as a cruel pawn, but now he is just a vulnerable target in her father's crosshairs. Sometimes in life, the bravest thing we can do is shield the very people we were taught to despise. Her trembling fingers grab her phone, typing a step's plea to meet. His reply illuminates the dark room, the old marina. Pier 9, midnight. She erases her digital tracks and slips from the suffocating study like a ghost. For the first time, Stefani feels the terrifying thrill of choosing her own destiny, knowing that betraying her father is a point of absolute no return. The scene cuts to the abandoned marina. The air is thick with the scent of rusted iron and freezing ocean water, broken only by the rhythmic crash of the black waves. She stands at the edge of Pier 9, burying her shaking hands deep inside her coat. Ruben emerges slowly from the heavy fog. "You came?" she whispers into the cold wind. "You asked," he replies, his voice like a grinding stone. He steps closer, demanding to know why they are hiding in this desolate wasteland. "To truly reclaim your life, you must look your worst nightmare directly in the eye." Stephanie closes her eyes and takes one massive, agonizing breath. The camera circles them as she confesses her intrusion into the Don's digital vault. Ruben's posture shifts instantly, his muscles quilling as he demands to know what she found in the dark. She holds his gaze, her voice breaking as she delivers the sentence. If their arranged marriage falters, her father will slaughter him. Ruben freezes, his breath turning to mist in the freezing air. He begs to be sure. She nods, describing the execution list, the dates, the sickening methods.
Her father engineered this betrayal before they even met. Rube drags a trembling hand through his hairs. He asks the one question hanging in the fog: why risk a bullet to warn an enemy?
The truth is, raw vulnerability is the only real foundation for trust. She softens, tears welling in her eyes as she whispers that he was right. What they had in Barcelona was real. Stefani closes the distance between them, letting the heavy iron armor of her Mafia upbringing crash to the pier. In a fractured whisper, she confesses she cannot let her father put him in the ground. Ruben stares back, his guarded expression completely shattered. She paints the bleak reality of their tragedy. If she flees, her brother Louis will face the executioner. If she declares open war, 2 crime syndicates will drown their city in blood. But standing together, they might just survive the storm. It reminds us of a fragile human truth sometimes. The absolute bravest act a person can commit is simply reaching out to ask for help. Ruben does not blink. He tightly grips her trembling hand, pledging his life to hers. The danger still suffocates them, so she pulls out her phone. The screen illuminates his face like a digital guillotine in the black night. The cold light from the phone washes over Ruben's face, casting hollow shadows under his eyes as the true horror sets in. He reads the screen, realizing it is not just her father orchestrating the slaughter. The ultimate crushing betrayal is seeing his own bloodline signing off on the massacre. This union was never meant to bring peace. It was a loaded weapon, and these aging kings were firing their own children into the abyss. We all must eventually confront a bitter reality. The very people designated to protect us are frequently the ones twisting the knife in the dark. Stefani holds his shattered gaze, swearing to reduce their father's empire to ash. A slow, terrifyingly beautiful smirk cuts across Ruben's face, and the loyal son dies right there on the wet concrete fate. They pivot away from each other, disappearing into the fog to finally ignite the war. Ruben dissolves into the swirling fog, leaving Stefani swallowed by the damp, oppressive silence of the docks. She retreats to her idling town car, where Marco, her lifelong driver, sits like a stone sentinel as the looming iron gates of her father's estate bleed through the windshield. She asks softly if he could manage to look the other way for just one night. Marco keeps his eyes locked on the road,
his jaw clenching as he murmurs that it depends on the night. When she breathes the word wedding, his knuckles turn stark white against the steering wheel.
She is asking this man to draft his own suicide note. True loyalty is a devastatingly rare currency, proving that defending someone often demands risking your very life. Marco slowly turns to study her pale, exhausted face, feeling the weight of the impending destruction. She only needs his silence to win. Marco holds her gaze in the rearview mirror, the silence stretching so tight it threatens to snap. Finally, the loyal driver lets out a heavy, shuddering sigh. He states, in a voice devoid of emotion, that he never saw her live the yesterday night, and he certainly did not drive her back. If the compound burns on the wedding, his alibi is carved in stone. You and I know perfectly well that true survival often demands we quietly bend the rules when a deeper morality is on the line. A tear of relief slips down Stefani's cheek, but Marco's hardened eyes silence her comfort. If her gambit fails, they will be buried in the exact same unmarked grave. She steps out into the freezing mist, her posture shifting from daughter to soldier. For the next 72 hours, she delivers a terrifying masterclass in deception, smiling perfectly as the obedient bride at every dinner. To her ruthless father, she masterfully shrinks back into the fragile, obedient doll he always demanded. But past exhausted eyes, the gears of a lethal war machine are grinding into place. Life teaches us a vital lesson. The most difficult strategy in any conflict is allowing your enemy to confidently believe they have already won. Moving silently beneath this camouflage, she reaches Ruben twice, first amid the noise of a bustling cafe, then inside a Rotting's motel room paid for in untraceable cash. Ruben paces the stained carpet like a caged wolf, arguing that whispers will not stop a mafia war. They need hard, undeniable proof to shatter their family's alliance permanently. Stefani sits flawlessly still on the edge of the sagging bed, illuminated only by the pale glow of her laptop. Without this is a single blink, she whispers that she knows exactly where the files are kept. Stick with me here, because the tension in that tiny motel room becomes absolutely suffocating. The documents are locked beneath military-grade encryption inside the Don's downtown fortress. Ruben stops his frantic pacing, turning slowly to ask if she can actually get them past the armed guards. She outlines a desperate theory she could fake a panic about the wedding contracts, buying them a razor-thin 5-minute window before security swarms the vault. Ruben flashes a dark, predatory smile. 5 minutes is all they need to drain a decade of blood money and hand it to the feds. But a wave of nausea washes over Stefani. Choosing Joyster's path always demands a terrible toll, and standing up for the truth means watching your entire world turn to ash. When the smoke finally clears, her ruthless father will know exactly which of his children held the match. Ruben sinks onto the mattress beside her, his voice heavy with a sobering truth. His father will figure it out, too. The second they initiate the download, their generational wealth and syndicate protection will vanish into thin air. They will become the hunted. He searches the depths of her dark eyes, asking if she is truly prepared to weather a storm of bullets. Stefani quietly studies his face. The man who manipulated her in Barcelona is now her only anchor to life. She throws the question right back. Is he ready? Ruben gently reaches out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear, a tragic gesture that nearly shatters her iron composure. He whispers that he has wasted his entire youth playing the loyal Mafia prince-ins. It is a haunting revelation. Living solely to fulfill the violent expectations of others is merely a slow death. He smiles softly, finally at peace with watching his empire burn. The scene cuts to this shadowy library. That raw vulnerability shatters her final defenses. Stefani surges forward, pulling him into a desperate, reckless kiss. The camera circles them. It is the frantic embrace of two doomed souls clinging together while the cartel underworld collapses around them. Breaking apart, Ruben presses his forehead against hers, whispering a quiet promise that they will survive. You and I both know it is a magnificent, tragic lie. They are marching straight into a slaughterhouse. But sometimes, wrapping ourselves in a beautiful delusion gives us the exact armor required to face the firing squad. 3 days before the ceremony, Stefani pushes open the doors of her father's office. Waiting behind a massive mahogany desk is Adriano, an untouchable mob king radiating absolute terrifying gravity. Adriano feigns pleasant surprise as his daughter glides into the dim study. She takes a seat, stating she must analyze the fine print before signing her freedom away. He flashes an arrogant smile, praising her intellect while sliding the folder across the desk. Stefani delivers performance, tracing the legal jargon while her mind locks onto her target. True discipline in life is possessing the patience to sit perfectly still until the moment arrives to strike. A sudden vibration shatters the quiet. Adriano frowns at his phone, mutters an excuse, and steps into the hall. The millisecond that door clicks shut, the dutiful daughter vanishes as she bolts around the desk, jamming a drive into the machine just as a cold password prompt flashes onto the monitor. Her hands tremble as she punches her brother's birthday into the keyboard. The screen flashes a sickly green, illuminating her face. She uncovers the restricted folders, downloading her family's darkest secrets, hit lists, corrupt contracts, endless blood money, the bar crawls, 10%, small percent, 20. A cold sweat races down her neck, 40. Heavy footsteps echo in the hall, 60. Remaining perfectly calm when the walls are closing in is the ultimate test of human endurance. The brass doorknob turns at 80%. She violently yanks the drive burying it in her pocket just as Adriano swings the door wide. Her heart hammers furiously against her ribs. He casually asks if the terms suit her. Stefani rises smoothly, forcing a deadpan smile, and declares she is ready to sign. He simply stares back. Adriano breaks the heavy silence, flashing a calculated smile. He whispers how proud he is, assuring her she is making the right choice. Stefani beams back, pouring every drop of deception into her expression, and quietly agrees. The second her boots hit the pavement outside, she releases a massive, trembling breath. She fires a rapid text to Ruben. Got it. His reply illuminates the screen instantly. Good. Now we wait. You and I both know the darkest truth of human nature, the most dangerous lies are always delivered behind a warm, gentle smile. By Friday morning, the estate descends into absolute madness. Armed guards, frantic florists, and endless seas of white roses flood the grounds. It looks exactly like a beautiful fairy tale. But down in this underworld, fairy tales always end in blood. Stefani stands perfectly still in the dim bedroom, staring at the extravagant white wedding gown hanging from the oak door. To any outsider, that heavy silk screams of celebration. But to her, it is nothing more than a beautifully tailored coffin. A hesitant knock breaks the suffocating silence. Luca pushes the door open, looking utterly hollow. He slumps onto the mattress, pleading in a rough whisper, begging her not to throw her life away. She reaches out, wrapping her fingers around his trembling hand. Her gaze locks onto his, warning him to stay far away from tomorrow's carnage. We all learn this painful lesson eventually. Sometimes the only way to truly protect the people you love, is to brutally shut them out in the cold. Luca just stares back, entirely lost in the dark. Luca studies her face, eyes heavy with the grim intuition of a man who knows this violent world far too well. He mutters that she is standing on a reckless edge, yet he nods, swearing to stay out of the crossfire. She pulls him into a desperate embrace, terrifies this might be the last time she feels his warmth. When the door clicks shut, she dives into the stolen archives of her father. Hours bleed away until the massive estate falls silent. Then she uncovers it, a hidden thread of messages to a ghost named V. Constantine. You and I know the devil always hides in the fine print. This extravagant wedding was never a peace treaty. It is a calculated slaughter designed to wipe out Ruben's bloodline. Unrestrained ambition will always demand a brutal, unforgiving toll. The harsh glow of the laptop's screen paints the room in a cold, unforgiving light. Constantine lays out the horrific architecture of the plot in plain text. The directive is brutally simple: assassinate the young heir, Ruben, and stage it as a tragic accident to break his syndicate. And Stephanie, her own father, the patriarch who swore to shield her from the monsters of the underworld, dismisses her as a disposable pawn. Once her role concludes, she is to be locked away in a gilded cage. It is a chilling portrait of toxic control. Greed is a parasite that completely devours all human affection. He would gladly slaughter her husband and imprison his own child for absolute power. Remember, the most soul-crushing betrayals always come from the very hands that first held us. This magnificent wedding, the pure white dress, the flowers, none of it was ever about unity. It is a carefully designed snare, dangling Stephanie as gleaming bait. Picture her sitting alone in the dark, hands trembling, and as she forwards every damning receipt directly to Ruben. She knew her father was a cold man, but this reveals an entirely new abyss of cruelty.
Suddenly, her screen illuminates with a text from Ruben. I saw the files, he writes. Must we move up the timeline tomorrow, right in the ceremony, when violence demands your life?
The only viable response is to strike back with absolute force. Dismantling a syndicate right at the altar is a deeply terrifying madness. You must never let the monsters of this world dictate your ultimate fate. Reuben was completely serious. His message carried a chilling clarity. The moment the vows are spoken, her father will drop the hammer. We must draw first blood, he insists. Stephanie feels her pulse echoing in the quiet room, a steady as drumbeat of panic. Igniting a war inside a sanctuary packed with armed mobsters is practically suicide. Meet me at the church at 7 in the morning, alone. She stands by the glass, staring into the pitch-black night. Here is a harsh rule of survival. The absolute best moment to strike an enemy is when they are blissfully certain of their victory. Her father sleeps down the hall, oblivious that his daughter is about to burn his toxic legacy to the ground. She slips into a dark hoodie and vanishes into the dawn. The colossal doors of the sanctuary yield without a sound, revealing a space that feels utterly hollow. She spots Reuben waiting in the front pew, dressed entirely in black. He looks less like a groom and more like a cold executioner, a heavy bag resting at his feet. "Yea, you came," he murmurs into the silence. A bitter smile touches her pale lips. "Did you truly believe I would hide?" Reuben reaches into the bag and retrieves a heavier black box. It is a military-grade signal jammer. Once activated, every phone within a half-mile goes dead. Here is a fundamental law of conflict to stay before the first punch is thrown. Signal severs the patriarch from his muscle. With a slow, steady breath, Reuben hands her a tiny silver flash drive. "Everything is on this drive," Reuben tells her, his voice barely a breath against the cold stone. It holds the contingencies, the damning messages, every rotten secret of the syndicate. Stephanie stares at the metal, her chest tight. How will they deliver this? Reuben confesses he has already hijacked the wedding live stream. At his signal, all of that toxic truth will violently flood the internet. The realization strikes her he had been engineering this counterattack from the start. "Why keep me in the dark?" she asks, her voice fracturing. He needed her innocence to be entirely genuine to sell the grand illusion. It is a painful irony of love. Sometimes, keeping a crushing secret from the person you care for most is the only absolute way to ensure they keep breathing. "For my entire life, I have played it flawlessly," Reuben admits, his quiet baritone echoing against the vaulted ceilings. This the first time I have ever bet my life on another human being. Stephanie looks down at the metal resting in her palm. If they follow through, the resulting fallout will be absolute carnage. Untouchable men will finally bleed. Yet Reuben gazes into her eyes, completely stripped of his defensive armor. He confesses he would rather die free than spend one more second surviving as a caged animal in their toxic hierarchy. Listen closely to this profound truth. True freedom is never peacefully handed over by those in power. It always exacts a severe, painful price. She slowly closes her trembling fist over the drive. "Let us do it." She was into the dark. By 5:30 in the evening, the architects of the underworld begin arriving. A procession of black sedans lines the driveway, unloading ruthless bosses in tailored suits and wives draped in diamonds. Two bitter factions sit shoulder to shoulder to witness a fabricated peace treaty. They have no idea they've just secured front row tickets to their own violent demolition. At 10 minutes to 6, Stephanie stands alone before a tall mirror. She plays the role of the obedient Mafia princess in that suffocating white gown. Yet, hidden beneath layers of expensive silk, the silver flash drive is securely taped to her bare thigh. We all know that the most innocent appearances often conceal the deadliest weapons. A heavy knock from Marco shatters the silence. The final act has arrived. Marco fills the doorway, his broad features unreadable, like a slab of cold granite. "Are you sure about Cherry?" he asks, his voice a low rumble. "No," Stephanie replies, her breath shallow. Marco offers a deliberate nod. "Good," he murmurs. "That means your head is clear." The walk to the car feels like a grim march toward the gallows. During that agonizing 15-minute ride, she loops the terrifying blueprint through her mind. The jammer activates. The priest asks for objections. The bomb drops. Consider this a profound lesson in human courage. True bravery is never the absence of fear. It is the act of stepping forward even when your heart is violently hammering against your ribs. The car glides to a halt. A valet pulls the door open. Her heels strike the concrete, and the trap is set. The air inside the grand sanctuary is thick with a suffocating, wismicinating tension. 300 of the most dangerous figures in the underworld are now confined within these 4 stone walls. Stephanie spots her father in the front row, radiating a sickening smug pride. Her mother sits beside him, weeping quietly. Up at the altar, looking like a dark angel in a sharp black tuxedo, stands Reuben. Their eyes lock across the sea of dangerous faces, and he offers was one grounding nod. The booming chords of the pipe organ begin echoing through the vast stone hall. It is a deeply ironic soundtrack for the absolute destruction they are about to unleash. It proves a bitter point: never let your guard down simply because the scenery appears pristine. She takes Marco by the arm and begins the long walk down the aisle. Halfway down the velvet aisle, the silent confirmation arrives. A sharp vibration buzzes against her bare leg. The jammer is alive. An invisible cage has just dropped over the congregation, instantly severing every cellular signal from the outside world. She reaches the altar, and Reuben gently takes her trembling hands. His grip is warm, serving as her emotional anchor in the brewing storm. The priest launches into his droning sermon about eternal love and loyalty, but the hypocritical words wash right over her. Her focus remains locked on the hidden cameras in the balcony. The priest finally asks if anyone has a reason to object. In this brutal existence, precise timing is often the only difference between a survivor and a casualty. Reuben squeezes her fingers. It is time to light the match. Stephanie slips a trembling hand beneath the heavy silk of her wedding dress. Her fingertips brush the rough drape, but the cold metal of the drive is gone. A suffocating weight crashes into her chest, stealing the air from her lungs. She checked it just an hour ago. Then a voice slices through the silence, dripping with a casual venom. Looking for this? She spins around, her blood turning to ice. Her father, the architect of her misery, stands in the center aisle. The stained glass house casts a bloody red light across his face as he holds up the silver drive.
"Did you truly believe I would not track my own blood?" he whispers.
His eyes deaden.
Beside him, Marco, her lifelong protector, stares straight ahead, an empty shell.
It is a harsh truth of this world. Never underestimate the monsters who built the maze you are trying to escape. Let us watch this unravel together. The crushing weight of this betrayal sucks the very oxygen from the vaulted cathedral. Adriano stands victorious in the dim light, holding the absolute key to their digital rebellion. Marco, the stoic shadow she trusted with her very life, has been feeding her secrets to the wolf this entire time. Marco finally speaks, his voice a hollow echo against the stone, claiming he betrayed her merely to save her from her own foolishness. Reuben steps forward, his knuckle white, but the old Don just laughs. He knew about the livestream hack from the very beginning. The lesson here is painfully clear. clear, never assume you hold the winning hand when you are sitting across from the devil himself. The house always wins. Adriano is in his element, breathing in the heavy dread of the room as if it were pure oxygen. He lets his cold gaze drag over Ruben, casually whispering that he holds enough buried secrets to ruin every soul in those wooden pews. You can almost hear the bone crack in Ruben's jaw as he clenches his teeth, utterly helpless. The Don smooths his lapels, flashes a hollow smile for the crowd, and leans close to his trembling daughter. His eyes are like dead, black water. He commands her to turn around, say her vows, and pay for this treason forever. She hisses that she hates him. His smile only deepens. Life teaches us a simple, brutal truth. If a man looks you dead in the eye and promises to destroy you, believe him the very first time. The terrified priest drowns in a cold sweat as Adriano orders him to finish the sacred ceremony. Beside the altar, Stephanie drifts in a terrible, numbing fog. Her spirit is completely shattered into jagged pieces. She stands there, gripping her groom's hands, but behind her blank eyes, she is already a ghost. Months of meticulous planning, all those sleepless nights dreaming of tearing down her father's wicked empire, have burned to grey ash. They exchange rings with violently trembling fingers, and the priest stammers out the final question. Ruben speaks his vows, tying himself to a sinking ship. Then the suffocating silence falls squarely onto Stephanie's shoulders. We only truly learn what our soul is made of when our back is fully pressed against the absolute bottom. Now, stick with me here, because this is where a quiet tragedy explodes into sheer chaos. Instead of letting her spirit snap, Stephanie looks Ruben in the eye, whispers a tearful apology, gathers up her heavy silk gown, and bolts it. She runs down the aisle like a hunted animal. The church erupts into absolute madness. The Don roars vicious commands. Guests scream in horror, and heavy boots hammer against the marble floor. She crashes through the grand doors into the blinding morning sun, fiercely refusing to be a polished trophy. But reality is a brutal, unyielding wall. She barely makes it down the stone steps before massive arms wrap around her, slamming her violently onto the pavement. It is Marco. The bitter lesson is clear. Running away only works if you actually build a secure escape route first. Stephanie fights for her life, clawing at the pavement like a cornered wildcat. But Marco is a merciless wall of muscle, pinning her fragile frame against the cold metal of a sedan in seconds. Her desperate screams tear through the morning air, yet her former protector does not even blink. The heavy hitters close in as Adriano steps out from the cool shadows of the church archway. He casually adjusts his cuffs, acting as if he did not just shatter his daughter's universe into dust. With a voice like cracking ice, he orders his men to cage her. They shove her violently into the leather back seat. As the heavy door slams shut, her wild eyes lock onto Ruben. He is just standing there on the step, watching her vanish. Sometimes the people who swore to protect you will stand perfectly still and simply watch you fall. Ruben
did not have a single thing to save her. Sickening with your Stephanie. Escape was doomed, and he let her take the fall.
She paces the hardwood floor of her high-end prison bedroom like a ghost. She tears off the ruined wedding dress and launches a heavy brass lamp straight into the wall. Glass shatters in a beautiful, violent rain, and she goes on an absolute rampage, splintering chairs until the room looks like a war zone. Eventually, the fire in her veins burns out completely, and she collapses onto the cold floor, crying quietly into the dark. Hours bleed away. Then a sharp click echoes from the heavy door. Throwing a wild tantrum might give you a fleeting release, But when the dust settles, you are always still locked in the exact same cage. Stephanie looks up from the shattered wreckage, bracing her battered soul for her father's wrath. But no, it is Reuben's standing quietly in the doorway. She instantly demands he get out, her voice raw and bleeding, but he simpler it locks the heavy oak door behind him. The air grows dangerously thick. She accuses him of knowing they were doomed from the jump. Reuben does not flinch. He admits he suspected they were walking into a deadly trap all along. Why keep his own bride in the dark? Because he needed her raw, unfiltered panic to sell the beautiful lie. He needed the old Don to believe he had utterly crushed them. Reuben crouches down, locking his intense eyes on hers. Honesty is a beautiful, noble trait, but sometimes keeping a painful secret is the absolute only way to survive a deadly game. Reuben drops his voice to a dangerous whisper, promising her the game is far from over. Defeated and exhausted, Stephanie argues her father already holds the evidence. But this is exactly where the dark shadows shift. Reuben offers a calculated smirk, reaches into his tailored jacket, and pulled an identical silver flash drive. The one Adriano took was nothing but a clever decoy. Anticipating the trap, Reuben surrendered the fake. Hours ago, he sent the real files to the press and the authorities. By sunrise, both of their untouchable families will be reduced to absolute ash. Keeping her ignorant so her agony appeared authentic was a move of terrifying brilliance. The lesson here is as old as time itself. Never place your entire future on a single gamble, and always keep your true advantage completely hidden from the light. Reuben looks deep into her eyes and sincerely apologizes for the cruelty of his plan. He explains that if she had known the truth, her father's paranoid gaze would have seen right through her acting in a heartbeat. But Stephanie's mind races to catch up. They actually did it. The mighty Don is about to lose his blood-soaked empire forever. She stares at him, and a broken spherical lava escapes her trembling lips. She calls them both completely insane. Reuben simply shrugs. The heavy reality sets in. They could easily be executed for the treason. But Reuben pulls her to her feet, his grip firm and steady. He frames her face with his warm hands, swearing they are not dying tonight. You truly discover who will stand by your side when the world turns against you and the heavy alarms finally begin to wail. I want you to pay close attention, because the stakes are about to double. Seeing the desperate hope burning in his dark gaze, Stephanie whispers her surrender. With their world actively exploding around them, she pulls him in for a great defiant kiss. It is the absolute point of no return. The war has been ignited, and they are standing at ground zero. But the fragile moment shatters as heavy boots echo down the marble hallway. Reuben snaps straight into cold survival mode. He mutters that they are out of time, dragging her toward the massive window. He asks if she can climb. She peers over the ledge, staring down a terrifying 3-story drop to the jagged stones below. Always make sure you have a clear way out before declaring war on a truly dangerous man. Stephanie looks at him as if he has completely lost his mind, pointing out the very real chance of snapping her neck on those brutal stones. Reuben remains totally unfazed. He pries the window open, scanning a fragile wooden trellis choked by dead ivy. He mutters that it will probably hold their weight. Probably. Stephanie is paralyzed by the dizzying heights, but the violent footsteps outside are multiplying fast. This is a full Hiet squad, and her father knows exactly who is trapped in that room. They have less than 2 minutes before the thick oak door becomes kindling. She stares at the barricade, then back at the lethal plunge into the dark, and finally breathes out a weary agreement. Let this be your guiding thought when your options are certain destruction or a blind leap. You either Reuben wastes not a breath. The moonlight catches the sharp anger's jaw as he throws one leg over the precipice. Testing the ancient brittle trellis, it releases a wretched groan, yet the rotten wood bears his weight. He meets Stephanie's terrified gaze with a dark, silent command. She kicks off at her heels, gathering the torn silk of her gown, and steps onto the freezing ledge. The midnight wind whips her bare skin as her feet scrape frantically against the icy brick. Above them, a violent, bone-rattling crash shatters the night. Her father's men are breaking the door. Reuben hisses from the shadows, his face tight with dread as the latter splinters. There is a simple, enduring truth here. Practicality will always outlive pride, for you never know when the night will force you to run for your very life. Let us look closely at this tragic frame, you and I. Reuben whispers the golden rule of the descent, begging her never to look down. But human terror is a heavy thing, and her eyes dragged the earth. Inside her childhood bedroom, a massive crash announces the oak door finally giving way. The vicious barks of her father's soldiers echo out the window. Pure panic takes her. Stephanie slips, her torn fingers bleeding against the wood until Reuben's hand locks around her ankle. Yet hope is a cruel illusion. A sickening snap splits the night as the trellis rips away from the brick. They plummet, violently striking the freezing soil. Reuben drags her bruised body upright, begging her to run. The universe offers a bitter lesson here. Gravity holds no sympathy for the desperate survival plans of broken children. Observe how pure survival paints itself in blood. Stephanie limps across the manicured lawns of a rotting empire, her elegant gown reduced to crimson shreds. The sharp crack of gunfire echoes through the estate, a terrifying echo of her father's obsessive control. Reuben pulls her violently through a wall of thorns, physically tearing them from the suffocating grip of their poisoned legacy. Hidden deep down a dirt road sits a black sedan, its engine purring like a waiting beast. It is the silent escaper hatch he spent months agonizing over. He shoves her into the leather seat and violently buries the gas pass pedal. This moment reveals a beautiful, undeniable truth. True power is never found in the cold steel of a loaded weapon. Real power is planted in your getaway car long before the family estate begins to burn. The tires scream like tortured souls as Reuben forces the heavy car onto the asphalt. Stephanie twists in the leather seat, her chest heaving as she watches her father's loyal men swarm the dark estate like locusts. Shadow clanks boots and raises a pistol. Reuben roars a warning just as lead shatters the night. The rear window explodes, raining glittering glass across Stephanie's ruined dress. Reuben wrenches the steering wheel with brute force, throwing the sedan around a sharp corner and erasing her entire childhood in the rearview mirror. She sits paralyzed by the sheer horror of the truth. Her own father just commanded her slaughter. The night delivers a brutal, necessary lesson. We cannot choose the tragic bloodlines we inherit, but we always hold the power to choose the one driving us out of hell. The psychological weight of the betrayal begins to crush Stephanie entirely. Reuben casts a heavy, shadowed glance her way, silently welcoming her to the cold side of the war. Her response is haunting. A fragile, breathless laugh spills from her lips. It holds no joy, only the terrifying sound of a human mind fracturing under absolute heartbreak. She believes they are driving to their graves. Yet, Reuben sits anchored in a chilling, motionless calm. A faint smile as she touches his face, deaf to the panic, as he promises her the night has only just begun. They carve through the dark for an hour, taking every phantom turn to lose their hunters. Finally, the car creeps into the dead silence of a Brooklyn garage. The tragedy teaches a dark lesson. A shield of paranoia is the finest armor against those who claim to love you. We have watched what the mighty fall, you and I, but rarely with such tragic speed. Stephanie whispers into the damp stairwell, her voice trembling as she asks where they are hiding. Ruben's eyes are tired but fiercely protective. It is a ghost location, untouched by the greedy fingers of the crime families. They climb 3 agonizing flights before the deadbolt groans open. The apartment is a bleak, hollow shell, sagging couch, a bare mattress, dust dancing in the moonlight. Stephanie stands frozen. Her $1,000 dress hangs in bloody threads, her bare feet leaving wet red prints on the floorboards. In mere hours, she fell from untouchable royalty to a hunted animal. He gently points toward the dark bathroom. This teaches a vital lesson. Always keep a quiet refuge hidden, for your reality can shatter in a heartbeat. Ruben quietly tosses a pile of worn clothes onto the counter, and the bathroom door clicks shut. Stephanie catches her shattered reflection in the cracked mirror. It is a devastating portrait of grief. Mascara bleeds down her face like black ash. A vicious cut opens her cheek, and violet bruises bloom across her pale skin. She strips away the ruined silk, stepping under the scalding spray of the shower. The water burns, yet she remains numb, frozen in the mist. She lets the fire wash away the filthy remnants of her father's empire until the drain runs clear. It is the tragic poetry of emotional survival. Sometimes, you must simply stand in the flames until the poison leaves your blood. She emerges to find Ruben, illuminated by the glow of his phone, sitting as though he had not just declared open war on the Mafia. She steps into the dim room, drowning in the heavy fabric of his shirt. Ruben looks up, his expression unreadable, and wordlessly hands over the device. So Stephanie takes it, her heart dropping like the screen is bleeding. Federal agents are violently tearing through the syndicates from New York to Rome. Her trembling finger swipes through the chaos, finding images of her father N's sacred, untouchable office swarming with police. The betrayal worked. She had leaked every hidden account and bloody order. There is a deeply tragic old lesson here. Hold closely the receipts of your suffering, for the unvarnished truth is the only blade sharp enough to slay a tyrant. Ruben turns back to the dirty window, watching the empty street as the ashes of their father's empires fall softly to the earth. By dawn, the ruin of their bloodlines will be complete. Stephanie shakes as the colossal gravity of their treason settles into her bones. Her father, a man who demanded to be worshipped like a god, is finally in chains. She softly asks about Ruben's own family. His voice drops, turning as cold as a grave. His father, his uncle, his cousins, they are all going down in the wreckage. He studies her face, searching for a fracture, asking if she regrets destroying her own name. Stephanie closes her eyes, recalling the hollow golden cage and the blood on the floors. She looks back at him with absolute steel. Not a single regret. As a relation, sometimes you must set that the bridge behind you ablaze just to have enough light to walk away. They stand together, 2 tragic ghosts finding peace in the ash. In a tragedy like this, silence is always a lie. The phone violently shatters the peace, vibrating across the scarred table. Ruben stares at the glowing screen. It is his father. The man who taught him to fire a pistol. The man who once carried him as a boy. He answers, letting the speakers project the horror. His father's voice slashes through the air, viciously demanding if his son comprehends the destruction he has caused. Ruben's hands shake with the sheer weight of it. Yes, he whispers into the dark. The older man curses him for murdering their dynasty, but Ruben's voice breaks with raw, bleeding agony as he exposes the rot eating them alive. It reveals a chilling truth. Sometimes the greatest monster in a story is the one who raised you. You must refuse to let them keep you living in terror. The patriarch's voice turns demonic, swearing to tear the very earth apart to find his son, promising to make Reuben curse the air he breathes. Reuben closes his eyes and delivers a quiet, devastating reply. You can try. The call dies tist. The silence rushing back in is agonizing. Reuben throws the phone against the mattress, his broad shoulders trembling violently as the adrenaline turns to ash in his veins. Stephanie slowly reaches out, her bruised hands gently lacing through his shaking fingers. She asks if he will survive this. He looks utterly hollowed out, a broken boy in a man's body, whispering that he will manage. Stephanie tightens her grip, refusing to let him drown alone. Not you, she murmurs. We will. It reveals a profound, undeniable truth. When your universe shatters, one loyal soul alters the entire math of your survival. Come closer, Lacey, you and I, and let us watch the Empire finally bleed. On the screen establishes her mother, she's sobbing in the flashing lights. Her brother Luca is nowhere to be seen, and she prays he escaped into the night. Reuben's bloodline, however, collapses in spectacular violence. His father screams at the cameras like a wounded beast, while his cousin wrestles as federal agent until dragged down, but a crawling news ticker freezes the blood in Stephanie's veins. The authorities are actively hunting the two of them. Reuben softly shuts the screen, shutting out the world. The law does not want them for prison, he whispers. They only want them as the final nails in their father's coffins. The system only cherishes the raw advantage you can supply. He asks the ultimate question. Is she ready to bury her abuser forever? She whispers yes. Stephanie's eyes reflect the neon rain, burning with the desperate need to watch these corruptors turn to ash. Beside her in the shadows, Reuben's jaw tightens. Then we do it, he vows, though the harsh lines of his face betray his dread. He understands the tragic machinery of this world. The old kings sit behind iron bars, but their loyal dogs still roam the streets, fangs bared. A sickening cold grips Stephanie's stomach as she thinks of Marco. Would he actually hunt them? Reuben shatters that fragile hope without blinking. Greed always devours mercy. He leans in, the dim light catching his scars. Look closely at this bitter truth. When the fire reaches your door, loyalty is just a ghost story for fools. Who is left? She trembles. He offers a scarred hand. Just us. The camera pulls back, framing a profound and suffocating desperation. By the time dawn bleeds over Brooklyn, they are already ghosts. Reuben tears up the rotting floorboards, retrieving a brick of dirty cash to buy their silence. They secure a rusted sedan from a phantom in an alley and flee westward. The grand strategy has collapsed into the raw, frantic rhythm of a ticking clock. Inside a decaying diner in Pennsylvania, the fluorescent lights hum a lonely tune. Stephanie stares at a plate of cold eggs, her stomach twisting in knots. Across the scratched formica, Reuben lowers a crumpled newspaper. Both of our fathers, he murmurs, folding the page, pleading innocent. It is the ultimate human tragedy. Men drunk on power will stare absolute truth in the eye and lie right up until the earth swallows them whole. Watch how the weight of survival bends the human spirit. Stephanie releases a fractured sigh, the metal spoon clinking endlessly against her ceramic mug. The syndicate bosses playing the martyr is a sick, poetic irony. She looks out the smeared window and asks what awaits them if they simply keep driving. Reuben does sugarcoat the fatalism. They will fade into hunted ghosts, and if they take the stand, Every contracted killer will trace their footsteps. A hollow, broken laugh slips from her lips. Damned to the dark, either way. She apologizes, tears pooling as she blames herself for dragging him to the edge of the abyss. But notice this quiet revelation. We so easily crush ourselves beneath the guilt of others' choices. Reuben stops her with a steady gaze. He chose this inferno, we must all own our descent. Let's pause on this frame together, shall we? Reuben leans across the table, the ambient Diana noise fading into a hushed intimacy. Without her, he confesses, he would still be a hollow vessel, choking on syndicate blood money. His calloused fingers wrap around hers, desperate to make her understand. She did not ruin his life. She gave him one. Stephanie looks at her exhausted, bruised reflection in the glass and coughs. She feels nothing like a saint. Reuben's mouth curves into deeply tragic smile. Good, he whispers. You just a human trying to breathe. We do not need to be flawless to earn our redemption. He promises they will survive this nightmare. But the Greek gods are cruel. The Dynador jumps. 3 silhouettes step inside, eyes cold as ice. Reuben's shoulders freeze. The wolves have found them. In the face of pure ruin, instinct buries terror. Reuben does not flinch. The camera tracks his hand as it glides inside his leather jacket, fingers meeting the freezing steel of his pistol. His lips barely part. Backdoor on 3. The lead killer closes the distance, a hand hovering near his belt. 1, 2. Stephanie S. pulse deafens her, the diner spinning into a blur. 3. They detonate into motion. Reuben drags her by the wrist, shattering through the swinging kitchen doors, past a cook frozen in shock. They burst into the suffocating pitch black of the alley. The rusted car sits 2 agonizing blocks away. In the brutal mathematics of survival, poor planning demands payment in blood. Boots hammer against the wet asphalt. Then the night shatters. The terrifying thunder of gunfire rips through the bricks. Reuben throws her to the wet pavement, their spines crashing hard against a rotting dumpster. The damp, freezing air slices into their burning lungs. Stephanie shakes violently. Pleading into the dark, who sent them? Her merciless father, or his old crime family. Through the fog, the shadows multiply, fanning out with silent, lethal grace. Reuben meets her gaze, his eyes entirely devoid of light, and racks the slide of his gun. She stares back, her heart breaking into pieces. He whispers that he only wanted to be a decent man for her, to bury the monster. But this is the grim poetry of our nature. You cannot lock away your inner demons when the devil comes to collect. The past always demands its pound of flesh. He counts his final bullets. His voice turns to ice, commanding her to run the instant he breaks cover. Stephanie swallows a ragged sob, her fingers clutching his jacket. She refuses to let him walk into the abyss alone. But Reuben knows the cruel algebra of death. He crashes his lips onto hers, a desperate bruising kiss that leaves an unspoken confession of love hanging in the freezing mist. In a single heartbeat, the gentle lover, the gentle Harden, hars back into a ruthless weapon. He surges up, his gun roaring twice in the dark. A shadow crumbles. Reuben bolts straight into the open, pulling every muzzle flash toward his own chest, becoming the ultimate sacrifice. Stephanie runs. When a soul purchases your tomorrow with their own blood, you do not insult them by looking back. You honor the dead by surviving. She reaches the rusted sedan, twisting the ignition, only to catch a horrifying glimpse in the glass. Reuben is hit, dragging his leg. Frantic shouts tear through the gunsmower's flashlight, slice the gloom. The Stephanie kicks the heavy passenger door outward, her voice cracking as she screams his name. Reuben hurls his ruined body onto the upholstery. Before the metal even clicks shut, she stomps the gas. The tires wail in agony. leaving the killers choking on exhaust as the car merges onto a desolate highway. Endless, suffocating miles blur past before she yanks the wheel onto an empty shoulder. Ruben is gasping, his fingers soaked in dark, wet crimson where he grips his ribs. He manages a sickly, trembling grin. "I am fine," he chokes out. Never trust the smile of a man attempting to hold his own lifeblood inside his body. Denial is just our frail shield against terror. She pries his hands back. The flesh is shredded. Hospitals mean certain death. Ruben is slipping deeper into his voice grinds like crushed stone, ordering her to press the pedal down. The compass holds no meaning anymore. There is only the desperate need for motion. Stephanie's knuckles turn white around the steering wheel, driving blindly into the void. Over an hour evaporates before a violently flickering neon sign bleeds into the windshield. A rotting motel, the absolute end of the line, where broken things go to quietly disappear. She throws bloody bills at the desk, practically carrying Ruben S. dead weight through a warped wooden frame. He crashes onto the sagging bed, his skin the color of ash. She peels back the soaked fabric to reveal a horrific, jagged tear. He offers a weak, bloody smirk. "Ever learn to sew? You only discover your true fortitude when panic threatens to drown you." The camera focuses tightly on her shaking, blood-stained fingers. Stephanie tears a rusted cabinet apart, unearthing a yellowed medical kit. She pours harsh antiseptic over the mangled wound. Ruben bites down on a dirty towel, his back arching, violently shivering as he forces the sheer agony to stay inside his throat. Her hands betray her fear, but she threads the awful needle, pushing she through torn flesh. 20 agonizing minutes pass before she snaps the thread, dripping with cold, terrified sweat. Ruben coughs up a hollow chuckle, branding her a miserable tailor. She whispers a sharp retort, their fragile smile fracturing into shared pain. You kept me alive," she murmurs to the shadows. He meets her gaze, his eyes bottomless. Real loyalty is a profound, beautiful debt carried quietly within the soul. Watch them closely as the midnight silence descends. Ruben finally allows the iron armor of the hitman to fall away. He confesses, voice cracking, that he was merely a ghost before her, a hollow vessel pouring violence out for the syndicate. She was the one who gave him a heartbeat. The walls in Stevie built instantly shatter. She collapses, shoulders heaving as she weeps, confessing a bone-deep exhaustion. The relentless running, the phantom sound of gunfire, the crushing gravity of paranoia. Ruben lifts a heavy, blood-stained hand, wrapping it fiercely around hers. "Listen to this quiet truth. Surrender is always the best radiatra than the struggle itself. Regret crushes the soul faster than fatigue." He pulls her against his uninjured side, swearing into her hair that the monsters will not win this night. She lets her swollen eyes fall shut, resting her temple gently against his chest, careful of the brutal stitches. The silence in the room breathes with absolute dread. She finally gives voice to the terror clinging to the walls. What if they do not survive tomorrow? Ruben stares up at the water-stained ceiling. "If we fall," he rasps, "we go down swinging." They slip into a jagged, nightmare-fueled sleep. Two broken pieces of glass, hoping dawn brings salvation. But you and I both know the morning rarely brings miracles. We cannot lower our shields just because the sun decides to grace the sky. Light cannot burn away the demons we invite. The deafening shriek of sirens violently rips through the quiet. Stephanie jolts upward, parting the cracked blinds. Her blood turns east. Red and blue lights. The wolves are here. Even broken, Ruben is awake before the sirens stop. His survival instincts remain razor-sharp. He grips his pistol, peering through the frayed curtains to scan the chaos. He murmurs that the officers are swarming the main office, ignoring the guest rooms. It is just someone else's mistake catching up to them. Still, it is time to vanish. They grab their bags, slipping out the back exit into their car. They roll out at a painfully normal speed. When the heat closes in, panic is exactly what gets you caught. True discipline is projecting calm when your pulse is racing. 2 blocks down the road, her phone shatters the fragile peace. An unknown number. Ruben begs her to let it ring, but she answers. The voice on the line is Marco. The nightmare has found them. The air inside the idling sedan turns heavy, carrying the cold of a grave. Marco, her father's ruthless enforcer, grips the wheel and reveals the grim truth: the syndicate is tearing itself apart. Behind bars, her father stews in a blinding rage. When Marco asks about Ruben, Stephanie N.'s eyes flash with venom. Let us look at this together, you and I. Half the underworld wants to bury her for treason, while the rest want her as a pawn. Marco offers a fragile lifeline, urging her to surrender to the federal agents and vanish. She rejects it instantly. It is a harsh truth of survival. You can never trust the architect of your prison scene to suddenly hand you the keys. She knows the men in suits are just as monstrous as the shadows hunting her. Marco begs for her trust, his voice betraying a deep desperation. Stephanie answers with a laugh so hollow it could cut glass. Why would she place her faith in a killer? But the heavy silence shatters when Marco makes a confession that tilts her entire axis. He is the only reason she is breathing. Last night he stood outside her motel and called off the hunting dogs. When she demands to know why the hardened enforcer fractures right before her eyes, he whispers that she reminds him of his own lost daughter, a ghost sacrificed to this Mafia war. It is a devastating reality that the most violent men often carry the heaviest regrets. He pleads with her to meet the federal agents tomorrow, offering one final chance to break this bitter cycle of blood. Marco lays out the unforgiving mathematics of their survival. The federal agents want them at the table, offering protection if they dismantle her father's criminal empire. The alternative is running blindly until a hitman puts a bullet in their backs. The line, it's dead. Stephanie lowers the phone, her hands shaking violently. When Ruben asks for the verdict, she confesses the grim reality. Neither believes this mob enforcer is playing a fair game, but sometimes life forces you into a dark corner where your only option is swallowing the slightly less lethal poison. Ruben clenches his jaw, bleeding through his shirt and out of allies. He admits they have no cards left to play. Stepping, they can never uncross. The thunder of the crime war fades into a suffocating silence. The sit-down is scheduled for noon in Lower Manhattan. Marco promised a safe zone, but Stephanie abandoned her belief in fairy tales long ago. Let us sit quietly with them in this dim diner booth, we're staring into bitter coffee. Ruben moves like a fragile ghost, his shallow breaths pulling painfully at the stitches in his ribs. Stephanie tracks the eyes of every stranger walking through the glassed doors. Ruben reaches across the scarred table, offering her one final, desperate illusion of escape. They could burn their names and vanish, but here is the tragic reality of outrunning your past. You can travel to the absolute edge of the earth, but your shadow will always follow. She pushes her cup away. She is done running. Ruben looks her dead in the eye, reading the irreversible shift in her gaze. You have changed, he murmurs. Stick with me, because you and I are going to watch this transformation take hold. Stephanie does not flinch. Instead, she reaches across the table and anchors her hand to his. A month ago, her father's betrayal would have crushed her. Now, She is the hardened steel holding them upright. It is a simple truth. Having just one real soul stand by your side can entirely rebuild your courage. The clock strikes 11:45 as they approach the massive gray federal fortress. Metal detectors hum against the cold stone, flanked by heavily armed guards. Waiting in that bleak, fluorescent lobby's mellowed mark, his face completely hollowed out by the agonizing shadows of his past sins. Marco exhales a trembling breath, looking like a drowning man clutching shattered driftwood. He genuinely believed they would run. They step into the steel elevator, rising in suffocating silence to the 6th floor to face the federal task force. Then Marco drops a revelation that fractures the quiet air. Luca is already upstairs. Her little brother has been feeding the agents information since yesterday. Here is a quiet lesson for anyone. Sometimes the very people you sacrifice everything to protect, to step up to save your life. Stephanie feels her mind stall. She is terrified for him, yet her chest aches with a fierce, blinding pride. The doors slide open to a sterile glass hallway, and they step into the blinding light to face their destiny. Marco leads them down an endless, glaring corridor to the final door. Inside, the tension is thick enough to crush stone. Agents hunch over glowing screens, but Stephanie only sees Luca. He sits at a massive table, character looking incredibly young and out of his depth. The second she crosses the threshold, the room stops breathing. Luca scrambles from his chair and crashes into her, burying his face in her shoulder. He honestly believed she was in the ground. Never assume there is a tomorrow with people you love, because in this brutal world, tomorrow is a rare luxury. Luca pulls back, thanking Ruben for keeping his sister alive. Ruben just shakes his head, his voice rough with emotion. She saved herself, he whispers softly. I just tried not to slow her down. A federal agent clears his throat, tearing right through their fragile reunion. This is Special Agent Chen standing beside an unsmiling prosecutor named Wallace. Luca refuses to let go of his sister, holding her as if his survival depends on her heartbeat. Chen looks them dead in the eye and drops the hammer. The Bureau has it all, the ledgers, the money trails, the blood orders. It is enough to bury their fathers in a concrete cell until the end of their days. It is the ultimate betrayal. But here is a hard truth about human nature, sharing human blood with someone does not give them a free pass to destroy your life. Stephanie does not blink. She does not shed a single tear. She stares into the cold machinery of the law and calmly tells them to lock the monsters away forever. But you and I know the authorities never offer a lifeline without a hidden anchor. Stick with me, because this is the exact moment the bill comes due. Chen lays out the bitter catch. The Bureau needs Stephanie and Ruben on the witness stand and forcing a jury to see the human wreckage these crime families leave behind. Ruben shifts into survival mode, demanding witness protection, clean identities, and enough money to vanish. The prosecutor promises they will be safe. But Stephanie asks the only terrifying question that matters. For how long? Remember, this rule: never trust a bright promise without reading the dark fine print. Wallace admits safety is not permanent, but insists the rival families will be destroying each other to ever hunt them down. The prosecutor claims the senators will be too consumed by violent vendettas to track them down. Ruben calls it exactly what it is: a reckless gamble with their lives. Wallace fires back, stating their only other option is waiting for a bullet. And the boy? Luca is underage, slide into protective custody until his 18th birthday. Chen swears on his career to keep the kid safe, but Stephanie has zero patience left for empty guarantees. She looks the agent in the eye and tells him his promises mean absolutely nothing to her. Take notes on this life lesson. Respect and trust are built on solid, consistent actions, not cheap talk wrapped in a nice suit. She meets Reuben's steady gaze, sharing a silent prayers. There's the desperate blind bet finally pays off. Reuben pushes through the heavy doors, his voice a low rumble demanding a moment to breathe. The fluorescent lights hum above them, painting the corridor in a pale white. There, leaning beneath a massive no-smoking is Marco. The cherry of his cigarette glows in the dimness. Stephanie fractures, her voice trembling as she accuses him of marching them into a slaughterhouse. Marco takes a slow drag, letting a cloud of grey smoke spill from his lips before shattering her reality. He is the architect of this operation. For 3 agonizing months, he quietly fed the feds everything. There is a deep lesson here to remember. Sometimes the quietest souls in the room are the ones moving every piece on the chessboard. The stolen ledgers was merely forced his final hand early. Marco grinds his cigarette under his heel, the scrape echoing in the empty hall. He lays out the grim decay of her father. The old patriarch was drowning in paranoia, his mind fraying so violently he was about to get his entire crew slaughtered. He just Sue deserved a real life, including Stephanie. She glares at him, demanding to know why he let her walk through the fire. Completely blind, Marco does not flinch. If her father saw the flicker of truth in her eyes, she would be in a shallow grave. It is a bitter life lesson to accept. Sometimes this paper will lie straight to your face to carry a true truth that would otherwise get you killed. Through the bloody war, this killer was her only silent shield. The weight of 1,000 sins rests in Marco's exhausted eyes. If he had not played the ruthless enforcer back in Barcelona, her father would have sent the true monsters. She never would have survived. Reuben asks what awaits the aging hitman now. The giant merely shrugs. He is fading into witness protection. No history, just a phantom haunting an unfamiliar city. The tragedy of his sacrifice strikes Stephanie hard. She steps forward, wrapping her arms tightly around him. The killer goes rigid before awkwardly returning the warmth. There is a profound life lesson here.
Holding on to a bitter grudge is a waste of spirit. Someone's risking their own blood to keep you safe. Pulling away, Marco whispers the war is far from over.
Stephanie walks back into the room, her choice made. The looming trial is exactly 6 weeks away. The dying syndicates are bleeding cash, desperate to stall the clock and erase the witnesses. In a windowless room, Wallace slams a folder down, decreeing that Reuben and Stephanie must be locked in separate safe houses. Instantly, the extinguished fire reignites in Stephanie's dark eyes. She stares down the polished lawyer, completely unyielding. If they sever her from Reuben, she warns, the prosecution will get dead silent on the stand. It brings to light a vital life lesson. You must never allow a towering system to force you into a corner when you are the one holding the winning hand. Recognizing the utter finality in her voice, Agent Chen intercepts the escalating tension. With a heavy, exhausted sigh, he finally bows to her absolute ultimatum. Look closely, because you and I are about to watch the quiet nightmare take root. Wallace is seething, laying down the absolute law. One single misstep, and the government will let the syndicate finish its grim work. The weeks dissolve into a brutal loop of psychological execution. Stephanie must drag her bleeding memories into the harsh light, recounting the terror until the trauma loses all meaning. Reuben is dragged through same mud. They are treated purely as living evidence, not as fractured humans. This reveals a chilling life lesson. The cold machine does not care about your deep emotional wounds. It only cares about extracting its conviction. Stripped of their humanity, they are finally discarded into a bleak, forgotten safe house, tucked away in the shadows of New Jersey. The safe house is surgically sterile, a hollow void wrapped in chain link fences and cameras. Yet, it is the first time they can breathe without checking their shoulders. When the agents depart, Stephanie and Ruben collapse onto a faded couch. The silence comes their sanctuary. Ruben plays scratchy films from the 1940s, while Stephanie rests her exhausted head against his shoulder. To an outsider, it is mundane, but to them, it is profound salvation. Here is a beautiful life lesson. Anchoring yourself to the right soul brings a quiet peace that all the corrupt wealth in the world could never buy. Still, trauma remains relentless. 3 weeks into this isolation, Stephanie violently jolts awake, choking on a terrifying nightmare about the tyrannical father she left to burn. Ruben pulls her trembling close in the dark, his gravelly whisper vowing the syndicate will never touch her again. The agonizing weeks bleed into a bitter February morning. The imposing courthouse stands as a paranoid fortress. Snipers monitor the icy rooftops, while armed marshals shadow every marble corridor. In the sterile halls, they spot young Luca. The boy appears entirely hollowed out, carrying the crushing weight of a dark legacy. It offers a heartbreaking life lesson. Extreme trauma ruthlessly evicts our innocence, forcing a fragile child to harden far before their time. The air grows incredibly thin as Agent Chen pushes open the massive oak doors of the courtroom. There, sitting at the defense tables like deposed, rotting kings, are the very monsters who gave them life. The courtroom air is dense enough to crush a spirit. Stephanie locks eyes with Adriano, the page who barred her soul. He sits like a hollow apparition, his gaze chillingly dead. He watches his daughter, not with regret, but simply as a tactical error. Beside him, Antonio vibrates with venomous rage, his knuckles are gripping the table. It imparts a brutal life lesson. Sometimes the very figures meant to protect you are the exact monsters you must flee to survive. The judge, possessing zero tolerance for syndicate theatrics, calls the tense room to order. As opening statements echo and fade, the prosecution summons Stephanie. Her legs tremble beneath her, but her chin stays defiant and high. Placing a shaking hand on the Bible, she vows to dismantle their entire empire of lies. The prosecutor asks the question that will shatter an empire. State your relationship to the defendant. Stephanie grips the witness stand. He is my father, she answers. With those words, the dam finally breaks. She dismantles his toxic legacy, exposing the blood money in Barcelona, the phantom ledgers, and the conspiracy to bury Ruben. She recounts the hollow theater of her arranged wedding and her desperate leap from a window. It illustrates a powerful life lesson. You can only push a human soul to the edge before it violently pushes back. She details the bribes and murders disguised as accidents. Through this exhibition of his sins, Adriano remains frozen. No remorse. He is a lifeless statue, watching his own flesh and blood reduce his kingdom to ash. The prosecutor asks one final question. Do you fear your father? Stephanie turns, locking her gaze with the man who broke her. I used to, she states, but not anymore. He does not own me. The gallery erupts. The judge hammers her gavel, but as Stephanie descends, she leaves her chains on the floor. Here is a brilliant life lesson. True strength is recognizing your worth and refusing to let toxic blood dictate your destiny. Next, Ruben takes the oath. His testimony is a sharpened blade, slicing through syndicate mythology to exhume every buried secret. Unable to contain his rage, Antonio snaps. He leaps up, screaming that his son is a coward. The judge instantly crushes the outburst. Yet, in that brief eruption, the agonizing fracture between a father and his boy is exposed to the world. Antonio collapses, reduced to a venomous old man. The ensuing weeks blur into a grueling marathon of trauma as witnesses pile evidence against the fallen kings. The jury requires exactly 4 hours to sever the empire, guilty on all charges. Adriano absorbs his ruin like a dead man, but Antonio shatters, screaming bitter curses until marshals physically drag him away. In the gallery, Stephanie grips Ruben's hand, drawing her first clean breath in months. The judge delivers the fatal blow, 30 brutal years in a steel cage, devoid of parole. This reinforces a timeless life lesson. The universe keeps a flawless ledger, and karma always arrives to collect its debts. Outside, cameras flash and reporters swarm the icy steps, but the noise can no longer touch them. The nightmare is buried. Camera flashes explode like cheap fireworks. Ruben stands as a shield beside her. Tragedy, something beautiful. Luca looks up, asking what happens next. Stephanie smiles, promising a fresh start off the grid. Agent Chen navigates the swarm, handing over a thick folder. New names, new histories. A quiet, rainy town in Oregon. Ruben stares at the paperwork, confessing he has never been out west. Stephanie leans into his warmth, whispering they will figure it out together. Here is a vital life lesson. Walking blindly into the unknown is infinitely better than decaying inside a toxic comfort zone. They descend the concrete steps, leaving the bloody rubble of their past behind forever. The camera pans across a cramped Portland apartment, miles away from the cold marble mud-soaked floors of the Mafia estates. Stephanie stands barefoot, watching the relentless silver rain wash the glass. The scent of cheap brewing coffee fills the air. Ruben steps from the shadows, wrapping his heavy arms around her waist. She traces the thick, pale scar across his ribs.
You and I know the hardest truth of this world. Sometimes you have to burn down the toxic empires you were born into just to find genuine peace in the most ordinary moments.
He presses a soft kiss to her hair, thus asking if the nightmares finally stayed away. She nods slowly. The hitmen are gone, replaced by the beautiful Frau quiet, normal life. Ruben leans in, his scarred face softening, just as Heb's footsteps break the morning quiet. A chluka shuffles into the kitchen. A typical school's Nosio senior hunting for cereal. Gone is the boy who used to flinch at a backfiring car. Instead, he complains loudly about soccer and mutters about college. Stephanie pours her coffee, savoring the absolute normalcy. She asks Ruben about his upcoming meeting. The man who once broke bones for a crime syndicate now wears a crisp suit, building a clean business. He admits the meeting terrifies him. Stephanie just smiles. It is a beautiful kind of fear. A simple, honest life built with your own hands will always far more weight than ruling our kingdom forged from innocent bones. The kitchen falls into a comfortable silence, empty of the armed guards that used to shadow their every move. By noon, so Stephanie stands by of a dusty bookstore. The older woman who owns the shop never asks why Stephanie still jumps at the slam of a door. It is a profound mercy. You and I know perfectly well that the greatest gift you can offer a soul running from the Devondale is simply a blank page and zero judgment. Suddenly, the brass bell above the door chimes. A shadow steps out of the driving rain in a dark overcoat. Stephanie freezes. Her breath catches as she waits for her father's executioners. But the man simply shakes his umbrella and asks for the poetry section. Slowly, the violent storm crashing inside her chest begins to fade into quiet relief. She exhales a ragged breath, pressing her pale hands flat against the wood. A lifetime bathed in violence does not simply wash off in the rain. The trauma leaves deep, invisible bruises. Stephanie still wakes up gasping, suffocating on the memory of her blood-stained wedding. Reuben still bolts upright at 3 a.m, waiting for assassins in the dark. But healing from that terror demands an exhausting kind of courage. Later that evening, the camera finds them bathed in the warm light of their kitchen. They boil pasta and laugh at nothing at all. There are no looming threats. It teaches us that true sanctuary is an active daily choice. They stand by the foggy window, finally letting themselves feel the peace they bought with their own blood. The rain taps a steady rhythm against the glass as Reuben leaks the sissets. His voice is a low rumble as King has the heavy question that still haunts him. Does she ever regret walking away? Tearing down their violent bloodlines to become absolute nobodies. Stephanie rests her cheek against his chest. She remembers the cold estates and the hollow safety they offered, then shakes her head. Leaving that poison was their ultimate victory. They lost an empire, but saved their souls. We all learn this lesson eventually. True wealth is never about the iron grip of power. It is about the simple freedom to live an honest life. She whispers she would burn her for the syndicate to ash 1,000 times if it led her to this room. Reuben pulls her close. They finally won their peace. 2 quiet years drift by, smoothing over the jagged edges of their past. They trade the apartment for a weathered bungalow with a creaky wooden porch. Here, Stephanie stubbornly fights the soil. Determined to keep a vibrant garden alive, it is a modest home, but every single inch belongs to them. Luca is off to university, calling faithfully every Sunday. Stephanie has found her true purposes at a local non-profit, helping desperate runaways escape the underworld that almost swallowed her. Taking your own darkest trauma and forging it into a shield for someone else is the most profound victory a person can achieve. Reuben traded his brutal enforcer skills for corporate strategy, earning a clean conscience. They are finally building a legacy out in the bright, open sun. I want you to picture this exact frame. The yellow porch lights cut through the fog. Stephanie Sandals Diva cutting the engine as the night fills with the hum of crickets. Standing on the wooden steps is Reuben, a man who used to dismantle human lives with his bare hands, now standing completely frozen. His massive fingers visibly tremble around a tiny velvet box. A fragile smile breaks across his scarred face. He whispers that their first engagement was strictly about survival, but this moment is entirely his choice. He reveals a simple, unadorned gold band. No cartel diamonds, no leverage. True partnership is never forced. It is built in the quiet, daily choice to stay. Tears spill down her cheeks as she nods, the ring sliding on like a perfect fit. 6 months fade away, and they make it official on an ordinary Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. There are no marble archways, no ruthless crime bosses clinking champagne glasses. It is just a tired judge, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the few people who actually survived their storm. Luca stands in the front row, cheering the loudest. Even Marco, hiding under a dead man's name in Montana, sends a massive bouquet of white lilies. You and I know the crushing weight of their past, but this room proves a beautiful truth. No matter how violently rigged the game was when you sat down, you can always flip the board and rewrite your ending. The gavel drops. The judge declares them married, and Stephanie pulls him into a fierce kiss that finally erases the dark. 5 years slip quietly through the hourglass. Stephanie stands by the sunlit window, feeling the comforting heat of her coffee mug. The silence in this house is not the suffocating dread of a cartel war. It is the sweet, hard-earned quiet of a life reclaimed. Soft footsteps break the peace. A 3-year-old girl shuffles into the warm light, dragging a battered, drab stuffed rabbit. She has Ruben's dark hair and her mother's stubborn jaw. When the little girl demands breakfast, Stephanie beams, lifting her high into the air. It proves that no matter how much toxic ash covers your history, you can always plant a new garden. Ruben wanders in next. The hardened mob enforcer has fully melted into a gentle father, kissing his wife before starting on a mountain of morning pancakes. Watching her husband gently flip morning pancake, a profound realization crashes over Stephanie. She actually did it. She clawed her way out of a living nightmare and built a true sanctuary. We often forget that genuine peace is rarely handed or freely. It is something you have to bleed for, fighting until your knuckles are bare. But surviving the devil always comes with a heavy tab. Later that afternoon, she takes a solitary drive to a forgotten cemetery on the edge of town. She walks past rows of weathered stones, stopping at Marco's grave. Her former shadow, her loyal protector, his tired heart, finally gave out a year ago. The doctors promised it was quick and painless. Staring down at the freezing winter grass, she desperately hopes they were telling the truth. She kneels in the damp grass, resting fresh flowers against the cold granite. Her fingers slowly trace the carved letters of Marco's name. In the absolute stillness of the cemetery, she starts talking to him. She tells him about the little girl he never got to meet, laughing softly as she admits her daughter is just as stubbornly defiant as she ever was. You and I must always remember to honor the loyal souls who held the line for us when the night was pitch black. A cold wind rustles through the branches as she whispers one final, tearful thank you. Fast forward to the velvet blue of evening. Their house is perfectly quiet. Stephanie and Ruben sit together on the porch, shoulders pressed tight, watching the fireflies dance in the dark. Out there in the cool dark, the conversation turns heavy. Ruben's voice drops low, asking if the brutal ghosts of their fathers ever haunt her thoughts. She leans her head against his chest, admitting the violent memories are finally fading. 2 years ago, her father's reign ended exactly the way it began, with a cold blade in a dusty prison yard. She had not shed a single tear. It is a beautiful truth. Toxic forces that once controlled you only lose their grip the moment you refuse to look back. Meanwhile, Ruben's father continues to rot in solitary confinement, choking on his own bitter poison. She sees off asks what would have happened if they had never met in that neon club. Ruben answers instantly. He would just be a hollow ghost, sitting on a throne of blood he entirely despised.
The camera cuts forward, leaving the blood behind. The lighting softens to the cool tones of a rainy Portland afternoon. He looks into her eyes, stripped of his old Mafia bravado,
and tells her the devastating truth. She dragged his soul straight out of the fire. Stephanie smiles, tracing the scars along his jaw, whispering that he did the exact same for her. Humanity spends forever hunting for flawless saviors, but real, enduring love is just two violently broken people deciding to carry the heavy pieces of each other's trauma. They sit quietly under a massive canopy of evergreens. She survived the terrifying cartel altar to build a beautiful existence from the ashes. Fast forward through a quiet decade, their young daughter sits across from them as rain hits the glass, finally asking the ultimate question. How did you meet? The camera lingers on the glow of a bedside lamp, catching a slight tremor in Stephanie's hands. She never mentions the syndicate. She buries the scent of gunpowder in her chest to shield her child from the blood stains of the past. Instead, she whispers a myth about a girl in a poisoned kingdom, and the quiet man who helped her burn it to ash. Think about the sheer courage it takes to strike a match to your entire life. Here is a truth we all love. Real freedom demands a heavy toll. You pay for it in silent tears, for stripping away the armor you once needed to survive. Yet every jagged scar she carries is just a map that brought her to this quiet room. She left a hollow empire, so her daughter will never flinch at shadows in the dark. That is the absolute sweetest revenge. We watched her walk through the fire, but look where the ashes settled. Standing in the dim doorway, the harsh glare of her past is replaced by soft moonlight. That old terror melts into pure gratitude. The greatest lesson here is simple. The true measure of a life is never the power you hold. It is the absolute miracle of waking up safe. She closes her eyes, honoring the hands that pulled her from the deep. Reuben, who stayed to be when everything burned, Bulbert, Luca, who offered mercy instead of a bullet, and Marco, who stood like stone against death. With a soft click, she turns off the light and walks down the quiet hall. Her husband whispers in the dark, pulling her tight against his chest. They stand together, anchored in the beautiful, ordinary life they forged from total ruin. We come to the end of our Aunt May's time together. Outside, the machinery of the underworld grinds on, chewing up the innocent and spitting out empires of hollow greed. But that noise no longer reaches her. Inside a quiet house framed by ancient oak trees, there is only stillness. Stephanie was bred to be currency for violent men to be traded at the altar for a blood-stained alliance. Instead, she flipped the board entirely. She proved that trauma is not a life sentence. You and I can take a profound lesson from her quiet rebellion. No matter how deep the cycle of violence runs, you always hold the pen to your own survival. She built her sanctuary directly from the ashes of their control. Have a good night, and remember to keep writing your way out of the dark and into the light. Stephanie's story also teaches that courage is not only about running away, shouting no, or making dramatic gestures. True courage often requires patience, planning, and strategy. At first, Stephanie tries to escape physically by leaving New York and building a new life in Barcelona. That escape gives her a taste of freedom, but it does not solve the deeper problem because Tasala still has power, money, and people watching her. Later, when she realizes she's channeling run Simbichurut without endangering Luca and others, she begins to think strategically. She gathers information, studies her father's weaknesses, secretly accesses files, meets Reuben, and helps build a plan to expose the truth. This teaches an important educational lesson. Bravery should be guided by wisdom. In real life, people facing unfair systems, toxic families, workplace abuse, or dangerous relationships may feel that only a dramatic escape can save them. Sometimes immediate action is necessary, but often lasting change requires evidence, support, timing, and careful thinking. Strength grows when strength only from fear and begins acting with purpose. She's scared, uncertain, and sometimes betrayed. But she keeps thinking and adapting. That is what makes her powerful. The story also shows that oppressive systems often depend on secrecy. When Stephanie and Reuben decide to expose the evidence to authorities and the public, they challenge the system at its foundation. The lesson for viewers is that truth becomes stronger when it is organized and shared wisely. But courage is not recklessness. Courage is the ability to face fear while still making thoughtful decisions. Education should teach people not only to resist injustice, but to resist it intelligently.